Ungrateful, the stinging words flew across the room. The man scolded her angrily for having given her first-class mentors, allowing her to enjoy a rich life, and to bask in a glory she couldn't even dream of. And you dare to express your gratitude by hurting my daughter. He shouted at the girl standing in front of him. I did not poison Vivian, father. The girl with hair white as snow and red eyes responded calmly. Once, as a child, she was literally sold to this man. First-class teachers, a rich life, yes. It was a blessing to escape from a village shelter that looked more like a beggar's den. If Vivian hadn't been terminally ill, he wouldn't have had to use an orphaned commoner as a pathetic replacement. He said while buying her, he didn't accept her into his family with good intentions, and she understood that. Thus, the homeless orphan became the daughter of a nobleman who lost his family. Shortly after, the Duke's dying daughter, Agnes, who was supposed to marry Prince Vivian, was replaced by the Duke's adopted daughter. Everything that made her Nevia was a farce, a fake portrait, a fake past, a fake family, replacement, forgery, imitation, it's all his doing. But the girl wanted to be real, the true Agnes. She worked hard to become real and wanted something simple, without complications. Good job, my daughter. The Duke of Iniacutes noticed her efforts and praised her more and more often. That's why Nevia thought they could become a real family. Duke, Lady Vivian has recovered. The maid burst out one day with a shout. The Duke immediately ran to his true daughter, forgetting Nevia. But she really thought they could become a family. Poison was found in the tea leaves you gave Vivi, yet you still think you can fool me. Everything I gave you belongs to our family, not you, scolded the Duke, slapping the girl. He truly believes that a commoner like her can become queen, and added that the engagement had been broken long ago. I have no reason to poison myself, Nevia replied calmly. But the Duke continued to shout that she was an envious scoundrel who hated Vivian because she became the wife of Prince Ares. And that's why she tried to poison her. The poison was found in the tea leaves that Vivian had asked for, and Nevia knew from a young age that it was better not to do something so obvious and meaningless. The most offensive thing is that, in this situation, the Duke doesn't even try to consider that there are many strange things about the incident. If I had wanted to hurt Vivian, I wouldn't have used such an obvious trick, said the girl, looking the Duke in the eyes. How dare you do something like that out of envy? The man, in a fit of rage, drew his sword and pointed it at the girl. He was outraged at how she allowed herself to hurt the prince's fiancée. Hurting her would be the same as inciting an assassination attempt against a member of the imperial family. At that moment, a young man entered the office and knocked on the door. He announced that His Royal Highness, Prince Ares, had arrived and promised to take care of the girl himself. Casting a look of contempt at Nevia, the Duke muttered that this was a disgrace to the imperial family, and left the room. That's very good, smiled the young man, left alone with the girl. I know you poisoned the tea. If she had drunk it, she really would have died. Nevia looked up, but the young man was not surprised at all by her words, and even accepted that it could be so, and added, approaching the girl, that if she was lucky, she would survive. I hated you from the beginning. After all, you common people are nothing but worms. He leaned over the girl, and she doesn't believe he acted alone, that the Empress ordered him to do it. Why did you seduce Prince Ares and anger Her Majesty? He ran his hand over her lips, wiping away a drop of blood. Without looking away from the burning fury, the girl slapped her brother's hand. This infuriated him, but he composed himself, threw the bottle at her, and ordered her to drink it. Even if it's not for long, she will live as a princess, except for what she thinks Prince Ares came here for. Nevia didn't listen to him anymore. It was always the same. Without thinking, she took the bottle in her hands and drank its contents in one gulp, under the young man's stunned gaze. How disgusting. You were stubborn from the beginning. The young man's face twisted in disgust. As soon as she drank the contents of the vial, Nevia began to cough up blood. How much longer would she have to endure all this? She just wanted to live together as a family. How much more effort was necessary? She did everything possible. She took off her bloodied gloves and looked at the design on her wrist. The number 1 gaped in red on her white skin. Brother, I am living this life for the 7th time. I have one last attempt, said the girl, surprising Wood Agnes with her words. She thought they could be a family, so she tried, but she should stop playing at being a family. See you in the next life, Wood. Now I will live for myself. She said this while feeling her consciousness fading. She will never repeat her mistakes again. The number 1 on her wrist changed to 0. Morning came suddenly. The soft rays of the sun slid through the window, welcomed by the singing of birds. Nevia opened her eyes and blinked, realizing what was happening. She was lying in her bedroom bed as if nothing had happened. Her new life always begins at the age of 8. How long will she live this time? Her first death occurred at age 20 due to a carriage accident, and she was always reborn at the beginning of her arrival at the Duchy of Ineacutes. It might be magic, but there is no reincarnation magic. Upon raising her wrist, Nevia found a clean wrist. The number had disappeared. It seemed this was her last rebirth. She failed 8 times. Where did she go wrong? What had she been doing during all these lives, trying to achieve recognition or find a true family? And what is the reason for her reincarnations? I was greedy, the girl whispered, realizing the obvious. Like Vivian and Wood, she wanted to trust her parents and be loved like other children. If she did everything perfectly, she would be loved, she thought. But now Nevia realized that she had been carried away by naive thoughts. She dedicated her entire 8 lives to the Agnes family. She gave everything, but received nothing in return. Bitter tears rolled down the girl's cheeks. She had lived too long with those people. She was tired and just wanted to die. Deep down, Nevia wanted someone to save her. It would be good if her biological parents appeared. She just wanted to be taken away from there. Nevia cried for a long time, but then calmed down and got out of bed feeling completely broken. She suddenly shuddered when she heard the click of the door closing, and hearing a muffled laugh, she realized this was Wood's doing. He often locked her in the room, and hunger had already become something common. In her 4th life, Nevia, afraid of being late for class, fell from a balcony, which caused her death. But there were also times when she was lucky enough to survive a fall, and then Wood openly called her an idiot. And that was how, standing in front of him with an injured arm and covered in blood, the girl just asked why he hated her. And as an answer, she received that with her commoner background, she was discrediting his family. From the beginning, Wood simply disliked her due to her status. But it was only after they started reproaching her for something that he began to seriously hate Nevia. Realizing that silence reigned behind the door, the girl came to the conclusion that her brother had already left and, of course, he had locked her in the room again. It was to be expected, but she still pulled the door which did not move. Well, how diligent he is, because to go down from the 3rd floor you have to spend a lot of time. An unreasonable amount. Nevia looked and felt the door carefully, looking for something that could help her. And very quickly she found that same hole. Once that little devil Wood made it, he thought it would be a good idea to let bees through that hole. She didn't understand why she was so obsessed with this family, but now everything would change. There was spare lamp oil around here, and Nevia took out a chair. Standing on it, the girl reached up diligently, and at any moment she would reach the bottle. When she managed it, she unscrewed the cap and thought that would be enough to ensure Wood's hard work wouldn't go to waste. So she decided to use it. The oil coming out from inside the room leaked slowly through the hole. Nevia hoped it would look like the oil had spilled outside. She returned the half-empty oil can to its place, and then looked towards the candle that had been lit since the night. The next instant, the candle was on the floor, and the spilled oil instantly burst into a bright flame. But that wasn't enough for Nevia. She wanted more fire. She needs a flame that can burn this place to the ground. She looked around the room for something else she could set on fire, and her gaze stopped on the stacks of books. At least they would be useful somewhere. A history book to memorize every night. An etiquette book to become an empress. Humanities to educate the aristocrats everything necessary to create the great Princess Agnes. However, the last obedient princess, Agnes, is already dead. The only thing that can protect her is the unexpected appearance of a savior. The savior who is only herself. Nevia opened the balcony doors, letting fresh air into the room, and fueling the fire. If you try to hurt someone, be prepared to pay the price, right, Wood? The girl whispered in a low voice with a smile. She went out to the balcony and contemplated the bustle of daily life. And then a heartbreaking scream echoed throughout the estate. Help! There's a fire. There's a fire here. A room on the 2nd floor caught fire. After all, that's where Lady Nevia's bedroom is. The servants noticed what was happening quite quickly. Nevia, standing on the balcony, heard the servants trying to break down the locked doors of her room. Finally, they succeeded, and the servants burst into the room. Seeing the magnitude of the fire, they immediately began to bring water to extinguish it. Please help. The girl was choking on the smoke and begging through tears for them to save her. Wood came out to the 2nd floor hallway at the noise and was surprised at where the fire was coming from. My playroom is next to it. What are you doing here? Quick, put out the fire. The young man shouted when he realized what was happening. The servants were not in a hurry to put out the fire, as it was too strong. Wood pushed one of the maids aside and announced that he would extinguish the fire himself using magic. What the hell is going on here? Silence fell in the hallway when the Duke of Agnes appeared. He was not happy with how the servants took care of the house, so much so that a fire occurred in the morning. Taking a few steps forward, the Duke waved his hands, performing water magic. The water, obeying the order, instantly covered the entire room, causing the fire to hiss and give up. Amidst the steam mixed with smoke, Nevia was found on the floor, coughing violently. Looking at her, the Duke of Agnes thought she was a precious stone that he had been lucky enough to find, and that he had given too much to let her suffer, so he ordered Dr. Hans to be brought. "My God, young master, how did you get here? Are you all right?" A middle-aged woman, frightened, ran towards Wood. The Duke of Agnes also wondered why Wood was there, since he hated Nevia so much that he was willing to leave her in the burning room. Meanwhile, the servants inspecting the scene of the fire discovered a strange hole in the door. It looked as if someone had made this hole and had poured oil into the room through it, which caused the fire. The woman shuddered. She knew for certain that the young gentleman had made the hole, and the Duke wondered if it was possible that someone's family had decided to take care of Nevia because he had adopted her. But the more he thought about the pain, the less real it seemed to him. Still, it seemed like a childish joke, too petty, so he called his son's nanny. "Philippa, I think you know something," he said, and the woman trembled with fear. Wood didn't understand what the nanny had to do with it, and almost proudly declared that he had made the hole. "And what? I don't see any problem with this," the boy wondered, not understanding why the nanny was so afraid. "Brother, I asked you to open the door," Nevia said in a trembling voice, barely able to stand. And trembling with cold, the Agnes family stared at the girl, and Wood was stunned at such impudence. And then, a rumor spread among the servants that the young master seemed to be the culprit of the fire. Wood completely lost his mind. The Duke reacted immediately, and a loud slap was heard. He shouted at his son and asked him what he intended, while the boy, stunned, brought his hand to his aching cheek. The Duke was furious. Everyone was busy trying to blame the Agnes family, so the incident could become a great source of rumors. Since the Duke of Agnes family owns the largest and highest quality magic stone mine, many would be happy to see them decline, including the Empress, Mother's family, whose main income is the magic trains that consume those same stones as fuel. In exchange for a cheap supply of magic stones for the Empress, the Duke of Agnes was going to make a deal that would turn his daughter into Empress in the future. Many eyes are on Nevia. There are rumors that the Duke is neglecting his adopted daughter. It would be problematic if the fact of her commoner origin came to light. It wasn't enough for you to lock her in the room, so you came up with the idea of setting fire to the mansion. The man shouted. Wood immediately replied that that was not true. He simply locked her in the room and had no intention of starting a fire. Furthermore, the boy was angry because his father was hitting him, his son. "What's the problem? She's not even an aristocrat, so why are you paying so much attention to her? Hey, who did you say set you on fire?" Wood turned to the girl and immediately shuddered in surprise. Nevia's piercing scarlet eyes looked directly at him, burning with an icy cold. She always trembled when she saw him, so why isn't she even looking down now? Feeling unusually confused, the next moment Wood got angry and hit the girl on the head with all his might. The girl immediately grabbed her head, and with tears in her eyes, blurted out that it was her fault. The boy smiled satisfied. "It's true, she is that pathetic. I'm sorry, brother, I didn't do this." Nevia looked very pitiful and was trembling with fear, but the idiot Wood didn't understand that, no matter what she said in this situation, random witnesses would hardly believe her. Excessive punishment for mistakes made makes people feel sad. Since she did nothing wrong, it will be correct to punish her for this. "I am very sorry, please forgive me, brother." The girl placed both hands on the floor and the next moment struck her forehead against the floor with all her might. She continued hitting her forehead again and again, asking for forgiveness, while a pleased Wood and surprised servants watched. The Duke of Agnes heard rumors behind his back that this was going too far, and he didn't like it. He was the first to ask the girl to stop doing that, and Nevia smiled slightly. "Nevia must still be in shock from the incident," the man said out loud, trying to justify what was happening. And then he ordered Philippa to take care of the girl. "Wood, you are on probation," the father said to his stunned son. Later, loud conversations were heard coming from the Duke's office. "Please think about it again. This is too severe a punishment. The young master is only 10 years old," the nanny begged the master emotionally. but he brusquely ordered her to be quiet. He couldn't stand objections, and if she had watched the children better, this would not have happened at all. How can you say something like that? The woman collapsed dramatically on the floor, but the Duke didn't listen to her. Instead, he called the butler Lyndon to give him an order. Specifically, to Wood's great annoyance, he ordered that Nevia's room be moved to the 3rd floor. When Wood tried to object, the Duke cut him off sharply. If you continue to behave like this, your punishment will be more severe. His voice was piercingly cold, and the boy had to swallow his objections. He didn't dare say another word to his father. The butler asked the young lady to follow him, and the girl followed him obediently. The 3rd floor is a place where only members of the Agnes family can be. Although Nevia was the one who started the fire, she came out unscathed. And since she received her reward, she should keep her mouth shut, even if she knows she's right. You can use this room, said Lyndon, leading the young lady to a spacious room. And bright. And upon leaving, he said that a doctor would arrive soon. Left alone, the girl looked around the room. It wasn't so bad. Now she was where she had long wanted to go, in such an unbearably boring place. Even though she's already 8 years old, she looks too small. Nevia looked at herself in the mirror. They don't allow her to gain weight, so since the first day, Nevia has been on a diet. Only through her own merits was Nevia able to get delicious food. The servants used this as an excuse not to give her proper food. Red eyes, silver hair, an appearance that doesn't fit with the Agnes family. And she hadn't been happy with it before, but now the girl couldn't believe she wanted to be like those vile people. She started coughing hard and felt chills all over her body. This has been happening to her since the morning, and it's very difficult for her. No, she cannot feel pain. She must be stronger and keep going. In each of the 8 lives, there was a similar sequence of events a year after Vivian's recovery. Nevia would inevitably die. The magic reflux disease is incurable, but in 12 years, when she is an adult, the cure for this disease will be found. Generally, during these 12 years, Nevia did everything possible to be part of the Agnes family, but she always failed. I have to get out of here somehow, the girl promised herself. The cause of all her problems was that damn Prince Ares. Whether she was his wife or his slave, he simply wanted to take possession of her. She must leave the Agnes family if she doesn't want to get involved with him. Current law states that children of the nobility are closely linked to their parents. In the end, if Nevia wants to get out of here, she needs to do 2 things: cure Vivian, and find a new guardian among the aristocrats. She already knows the cure for magic reflux disease and has a guardianship option. Duke Lark Esselrid, 30 years old, single, doesn't have an heir yet, but very soon the 2nd Prince Creed will become Esselrid's adopted son due to the death of Empress Estelle. In her first life, Nevia lived 22 years, and the same happened in her 8th life. The sudden appearance of Prince Creed with Duke Esselrid became the most discussed topic. Whether in appearance or skills, he was an unusual person in every way. Of course, it had nothing to do with her. Prince Creed said he arrived at Esselrid before turning 8, which would make him 1 year younger than Nevia, which means the heir's seat would be empty for about a year. Meanwhile, someone knocked on the bedroom door, and the maid announced that she had brought food to the lady. But before Charlotte could enter the room with a tray, a loud stomping was heard, followed by a shout. The nanny Philippa burst into the room without knocking and roughly pushed the maid who was in her way. She didn't even apologize to Charlotte, who looked at her with disgust. Lady Nevia, go before the Duke right now, kneel, and ask for his forgiveness, said the woman in an authoritarian tone. The girl looked at her bewildered. She really felt sorry for Wood, who was locked in a room for a day because of her, while she almost died in a fire, and she was already used to that kind of attitude towards herself. Charlotte, you said you brought food. Nevia asked the maid, ignoring the nanny. The girl immediately pointed to the tray she had in her hands, on which there was an almost empty soup. Although the girl was already used to this, she wouldn't endure it anymore. Now you're ignoring me, Philippa asked with dissatisfaction, thinking the girl had eaten something in bad condition. Nevia should be trembling with fear, because the nanny was very angry. But the girl only took a couple of steps toward her. Remember, the nanny had said strange things before, but why should she ask for forgiveness now? You are the reason why young Master Wood is in trouble, said the woman, pointing her finger rudely at the girl. The woman was full of righteous anger and was preparing to punish her pupil for her disobedience. Young Master Wood is the eldest son of Agnes and an influential aristocrat, and Nevia must not become an obstacle in the young master's way. Doesn't the young lady enjoy the luxury of the duchy? This man is the successor to the Agnes family. Young Master Wood is going to put this misunderstanding aside. The woman's words were loaded with accusation, but the girl only laughed slightly at her words and was certainly not scared. Her reaction enraged Philippa, which was immediately reflected on her face. She roughly grabbed the girl by the hand and threatened her, saying that since she was behaving like this, she had a great idea. "Oh, I know what I need to tell you. How the nanny was embezzling money and passing it off as child support," said Nevia, looking at the woman with wide eyes. Philippa was bewildered. What did she mean by embezzling money? But how did she find out about that? Every time in past lives, when the father found out about the embezzlement of money, he would kill the nanny because she was too distracted to get away with it. Let's start with the fact that at first she didn't collect much money, but later, even while saving, the food looked practically the same as now. Huh? Do you dare say that to someone who has been loyal to the Agnes family all her life? The woman tried to act with dignity, but in her soul, she was horrified by how this little brat could have found out. If she tells the Duke she's finished, we'll have to silence her. Philippa started to say that she had no idea where the lady could have heard that. But one shouldn't forget that, for a lie you get your tongue cut out, and the nanny completely forgot about the presence of the maid in the room. Of course I know about your loyalty, but it's not the kind of loyalty my father thinks of. Right, Nevia replied. She was very curious to know what the Duke would think when he saw her food. Shut up, how dare you say such a thing? The woman, horrified, let go of the girl's hand. She tried to threaten her that, if she kept saying such nonsense, she would get into trouble. But Nevia interrupted her and reminded her that the nanny knew about the hole in the door, but didn't do anything about it. Her father would suspect something was wrong. The Duke of Agnes couldn't stand liars. How disappointed he would be when he found out that his loyal servant was a traitor. "Why are you doing this to me? Who ordered you to do this?" The woman started to stagger from nervousness, and then she shouted that the lady had no proof to accuse her of this. But Nevia didn't need proof. She simply suggested going to her father. Just as the nanny ordered, she will go and kneel before the Duke to tell him the truth. Seeing that the girl was literally heading for the exit, Philippa completely lost control of herself and ran after her, literally throwing her to the ground. Just at that moment, the door opened and hurried footsteps were heard. The doctor entered the room and asked bewilderedly what was happening. Charlotte immediately ran to help her mistress. Philippa realized with horror that Charlotte had been there all this time, but she suspected something about her. "Nanny, you're too cruel. Even if you hate me for moving up to the 3rd floor, how can you treat me like this?" cried Nevia meanwhile. Sitting on the floor, Philippa didn't understand what nonsense she was talking about and asked very rudely. But the girl continued crying in front of the witnesses, explaining that she could not go against her father's will. "Philippa, do you dare to obey the Duke's orders?" asked the doctor, drawing his own conclusions from what he had seen. But the woman continued to deny it. She quickly started babbling that the girl was lying and that everything was absurd. But the man asked her why she pushed the lady then, and reminded her that causing harm to an aristocrat is punishable by law, which scared Philippa a lot. The empire, indeed, had very strict laws that regulated the relationships between aristocrats and non-aristocrats, and breaking them could result in death. She tried to justify herself by saying that it had happened by accident, but the doctor didn't believe her. The woman wondered nervously what she should do if the Duke found out she had pushed Nevia, and he would soon find out the rest. And then she wouldn't escape punishment. What to do? What to think about? The nanny was visibly nervous. "Nanny, I won't tell your father anything, so don't worry," said the girl's calm voice. The woman was perplexed by this nonsense. She really wanted to say that she would stay quiet, but if you think about it, she was just a stupid child. When Philippa started feeding her well and scolding her less, it would make her think she had one. But for now, she would quietly clean up the evidence. But Charlotte remains. The problem is that she heard everything. What to do with her? "How dare you doubt when a lady tells you so?" intervened the doctor, and the woman immediately bowed, accepting the offer. Philippa wasn't afraid of this girl, but she was afraid of the master's anger. So the woman ended the conversation and left, slamming the door. The doctor was still in shock from what was happening, but it was time to start the exam for which he had been called. Charlotte offered to take the lady to bed, and the girl accepted. Charlotte was a capable maid. After Philippa paid for her actions, Charlotte decided to follow in her footsteps. Now she pretends to be on the nanny's side, but in reality, she has bribed most of the servants who didn't get along with Philippa. And Nevia was going to take advantage of this. The exam has finished. Fortunately, there are no serious injuries, reported the doctor after a while. He recommended rest and also taking medication with light food, but the girl dismissed the doctor. Please keep what happened a secret. I don't want the nanny to be punished because of me, asked Lady Nevia. The doctor agreed, but he wasn't happy that the aristocrat behaved so stupidly in the end. Others would inevitably start ignoring such an aristocrat. Soon the doctor left, and the door closed behind him. Nevia's maid also asked permission to say goodbye, but as soon as she turned to exit through the door, the girl's stern voice was heard, which didn't allow her to leave. Do you think I'll let you go so easily? The girl smiled slightly. Charlotte froze, the lady's tone caused her concern. But recovering, the maid asked with a smile if the lady needed anything. Nevia understood that Charlotte wanted to return the money that was in Philippa's hands. There was nothing wrong with that. Although she plays the kind and helpful adopted daughter, she needs at least one person to act behind the scenes, as a cheap alliance she can create. The nanny won't expect the moment when everything is revealed. As promised, I won't tell on her, but you shouldn't start acting up, asked Nevia in a calm voice. The maid asked what the lady meant, and noticed that the girl's face had changed a lot. Charlotte is now the only one who can tell Philippa's secret. And what will the nanny do? She will try to deal with Nevia first, who promised to keep silent, or she will start with the maid. I don't understand what you're talking about. The girl lowered her head. And then Nevia assumed that she wanted to go and tell the Duke everything. Of course, he will take care of Philippa, but he will also be interested in knowing how Charlotte found out about everything. Do you think that in the eyes of others, I will become an accomplice? The girl asked, nervously clasping her hands, and she herself understood that this was very likely. However, you don't think you left everything as it was, do you? Asked Nevia, and she offered Charlotte her hand. In other words, she wants the girl to work for her. By helping Nevia, Charlotte will be able to get what Philippa enjoys. Charlotte didn't understand if the lady would allow her to steal money, but then she herself would become the next candidate for execution. But still, Charlotte couldn't miss this opportunity. It turns out you don't like the Agnes house, realized the maid. But that was putting it too mildly, Nevia. She would never become a true daughter to them. The limits of their relationship are clear. The owners and their loyal bitch, the adopted daughter of commoner origin, who was lucky to join an aristocratic family, they will be happy. The Agnes family must understand that even the most loyal dog can bite its owner's hand if they constantly hit it. So Charlotte, what do you think about this? Asked Nevia. Charlotte wondered if it was dangerous, and if the lady had a plan that could drag Philippa down. However, she didn't feel such an unusual aura in either Lord Wood or Lady Vivian. Even today's fire doesn't seem like a coincidence, nor does her move to the third floor. Then the maid bowed respectfully and said she trusted Lady Nevia. Great, then good luck, the girl smiled sincerely. In that case, they need to discuss the next job. First, Philippa steals money along with the chef. Therefore, Charlotte must meet with him and tell him that she suspects Philippa of theft. In other words, sow the seed of discord and ensure that only Philippa knows that she is faithful to Lady Nevia. It will look like the three of us are in this together, added the girl. Charlotte was worried that if the nanny got rid of the evidence, but Nevia said it didn't matter. The chef should have the expense book. After having given all the instructions to the maid, Nevia released the girl. But before leaving, she asked if the lady wanted to eat, to which Nevia said she would eat later. The door closed behind the maid, and Nevia let out a small sigh. She still felt bad, but she tried not to show it to anyone. Deciding that she should rest, the girl went to bed. Everything will be fine. She won't let anyone hurt her again. No one. Nevia fell into a deep sleep and suddenly found herself in a strange void. She didn't understand where she was, and it was very dark in that place. There was an eerie silence around her, but suddenly Nevia heard a faint sound and raised her head. The girl shuddered in surprise because a huge red eye was looking directly at her. She was trembling with fear. That thing was looking directly at her. The eyes grew larger. It was so creepy that she felt as if she were being swallowed. Purple lines like tentacles separated from the eye and began to surround the girl. One of them slid sharply across Nevia's wrist, leaving a cut. With each passing second, she was consumed more and more, and it seemed the end was near. But suddenly, the purple darkness was interrupted by the bright moonlight. Nevia felt the darkness receding, and now she was free. It was actually the crescent moon that was protecting her. Her wrist was also fine and didn't even hurt. The girl pulled back her sleeve and looked at her hand, but couldn't see it. Everything was blurry. She opened her eyes and slowly came to. Nevia jumped up sharply and couldn't understand how she ended up in her bed again. She couldn't stop her heart from beating wildly and her whole body from trembling. Whatever it was, it seemed monstrous. Calm down, Nevia. Control yourself. She hugged herself, trying to regain her composure and stop trembling. Perhaps it was because she felt bad that she had this nightmare, but when she touched her forehead, the girl convinced herself that the fever had disappeared. Looking at her wrist, Nevia discovered a black crescent moon on it, just like the one she had seen in her dream. Something tried to swallow her, but it seemed the crescent moon was protecting her. She could breathe a sigh of relief. Before there was a number with the number of lives in this place, so why is there a moon now? And the main question is, why did this happen in her last life? It doesn't bode well. A little later, Charlotte brought food to the lady, but was very surprised by what she saw in the room. The food she brought yesterday remained untouched. It seems the lady doesn't feel well. My lady, are you all right? The maid asked the calm-looking girl timidly, and Nevia was very surprised by her question. She smiled and asked in response if she was worried about her. This was unusual. Charlotte had been working for over a year, but for the first time, she was worried about Nevia. She started paying more attention to her because they became allies. When she started breakfast, the girl asked if she had completed the task entrusted to her the other day, and the maid answered affirmatively. Nevia noticed that the food had become tastier and also remembered the design on her wrist. She needed to check if anyone could see the crescent moon, so Nevia pointed to her wrist and asked Charlotte if the sleeves of her dress seemed shorter. Oh my goodness, it seems you've grown. The maid looked closely at the lady's wrist and added that she would order a new dress. From her reaction, Nevia realized she couldn't see anything. To be completely sure, she pointed directly at her wrist, noting the length of the sleeves, but the maid only confirmed they needed to be longer, as they would shorten even more over time. I think the sleeves should reach the back of the hand, pointed out the girl, and Nevia realized that the crescent moon was not reflected in her eyes. She agreed with the length of the sleeves and realized that, just like the number of lives, no one could see that design on her wrist. It seems that, just like the regression, this mark has nothing to do with magic. After finishing her breakfast, Nevia headed to the study room, thinking about the path that in order to leave Agnes, she needed to cure Vivian's illness. And her teacher, Edward Spencer, would do it. A former professor at the academy in the Holy Empire, an academy where only the elite can enter. But without using money, only those who have demonstrated their skills can obtain higher education. And despite his brilliant past, such a man became a tutor, a henchman of Agnes. Approaching the classroom, the girl slowed down and made an important decision. Since the teacher was going to die anyway, she would let him know that his mind control spell had been broken. How could I become a tutor for a small child? The man sighed with disgust. He hoped they would value him a bit more, since after all he was talented and was only appointed as the child's tutor. A child with a dull expression, awkward speech, and lack of knowledge. Edward needs to get rid of this brat in 2 years. He only needs to make her suitable for aristocratic society. Naturally, the real reason Duke Agnes hired him is because Edward is a mage who can use mind control magic. Using mind domination magic, he would brainwash Nevia so she would be loyal to Agnes forever. He knew it was too cruel for the child, but to cure his sister's reflux disease, he had no choice but to borrow the Duke's power. Reflux disease is an incurable disease that affects children born to a couple of mages. Children who contract this disease don't reach adulthood one day without warning. Their magical power is depleted, and the child dies. Since most mages are nobles, almost all patients with magic reflux disease are aristocrats. Thanks to this, Edward studied like crazy and became a professor at the academy. But there weren't enough examples. But if he borrows the power of the Agnes family, could he be able to find a cure for this disease? Hello, today is a wonderful day to study. A voice was heard, and the creak of an opening door was Lady Nevia, who greeted the teacher, and she made a very elegant bow. Edward Spencer stood still, his voice clear and soft, even with a touch of arrogance. But without too much attitude, the girl looked perfect, as if she had learned royal etiquette. But how could she change so much in a day? The teacher wondered, trying not to show his surprise. Maybe she was just pretending. Allowing the student to sit, he reminded her that last time he spoke to her briefly about the 3 largest duchies of the empire. And today, he would like to repeat the previous lesson, for which he asked Nevia to name the titles of the 3 great dukes. The girl started repeating without hesitation. Agnes of Water, Lucia of fire, and Ethelred of law. Edward Spencer then asked why Ethelred was called law. And Nevia replied that they were the first family to create a new civilization using the laws of magic. The mages of Ethelred studied the laws of magic, made formulas, and the foundations of the world. And as a result, they created the safety belt. But unfortunately, such a great family is in a ridiculous decline with the current head. Lark Ethelred, added the girl. This was true, but the teacher didn't teach her that. So how could she know everything so perfectly? You must have prepared well, said the teacher, but Nevia continued speaking. House Duffman specializes in mind control magic. They are also called the Duffmans of domination, said Nevia, looking directly into the teacher's eyes. In the days of the four great dukes, there was also Lightning Ailsa, the girl continued telling, to Edward's surprise. The more she spoke, the more bewilderment appeared on the teacher's face. Regarding Duke Ailes, how do you explain that he has disappeared from history? The girl asked. Edward Spencer was visibly nervous. Although he tried not to show it, he asked her what she meant by that. Maybe she wanted to test what he had studied so diligently. But Nevia didn't need that. She just wanted to tell him that she had nothing to learn from him at this moment. What did you just say? The man got angry and slammed his hand on the table. The girl wasn't scared by this. She took a pen and silently started writing something on the sheets of paper. The more she wrote, the wider the teacher's eyes opened in surprise because it was a chronology of the Eden Empire. Everything was written clearly and perfectly, without errors. Teacher, isn't it a waste of time to teach me what I already know? Asked Nevia. Edward asked her if perhaps she had had a teacher before him, but the girl replied no. And mentally, she added that she had always listened carefully to his lessons. If necessary, she can describe the material in this entire library. This is one of her talents. She asked aloud if it was okay to talk about other teachers when this could endanger the revelation of her origin. And this question took Edward by surprise again. The girl continued saying that, as the teacher had already guessed, she was a commoner. But the man didn't understand why she was telling him all that. The mind control magic hadn't worked. Having decided it was time to strengthen the spell, the man immediately got to work. He had never heard such words from her. The princess should not say such things in the future. But nothing happened, and the girl just smiled satisfied. Teacher, I know a way to cure magic reflux, she said. Edward froze, digesting what she had said, and as soon as he understood the meaning of her words, he approached the girl, asking her how she knew and what she knew. Besides, Princess Vivian was still sick. Nevia smiled even more, and explained that no one knew yet how to cure magic reflux, and that she was the only one who knew anything. It seemed Edward understood what this girl meant. So, do you want to blackmail me with this? The man's hands were trembling from the excess of emotions. How does she dare to manipulate the emotions of others? Edward was a smart man and suddenly thought that it didn't matter at all. How does she know that he needs this information? Duke Agnes wouldn't have told her. And what the hell is she thinking? Mind control magic connects your magic to another person's mind. Once the other person's feelings are revealed, then mind control magic can be used. She has been monitored this way for the last year. She was forced to miss her family forever and be loyal to the Agnes lineage. If the magic didn't work, then it's worth trying again. Everything should return to normal. Edward Spencer used his powers again, looking directly at his charge. But nothing happened, as if there were no magic. There is no suggestion, there is no lack, there is no connection to any emotion, which is totally wrong. It seems something didn't go as you expected. The girl smiled sweetly. Realizing that his efforts were useless, Spencer asked her what she wanted from him, but Nevia said he shouldn't say that. Now he should say that he would do anything for her. If the method is correct, then I am willing to risk everything. Edward Spencer literally fell to the ground in front of her. Nevia reminded him that he was a mage, so he could simply make a contract with her. The man tried to object that he wasn't a mage, but the girl interrupted him. I have destroyed your magic. I know you are a mage. And what kind of magic do you possess? Her speech sounded confident, so much so that the man wondered who this child really was. Superhuman mental powers are needed to break the spell. The moment the spell is broken, a person can receive a traumatic shock. In short, it is impossible to do. Meanwhile, Nevia said that in exchange for the information, he must promise her 3 things. First, for 5 days he will not treat anyone except his sister, and of course, he will not reveal this treatment method. Edward shuddered at the mention of his sister. She also knows about that. Second, in 5 days, he must find the Duke and tell him that he knows how to cure magic reflux. but he must keep secret the fact that she helped him with this. The teacher asked her if he should keep secret that thanks to his method, the princess was able to be cured, and Nivea confirmed that he must remain silent about it until his last breath. And third, persuade the Duke to choose me as the successor to the house of Ethelred, said the girl, approaching him. The teacher was perplexed. Ethelred, this place has fallen so low that they call it a dump. So why does Lady Nivea want to leave the Agnes Duchy? If she wants to marry well, then she should stay. And although Duke Ethelred is single and has no children, his cousin has 3, so they won't let it pass. Are you suggesting that I shouldn't bite the hand that feeds me? The girl asked. She took a few steps towards the window. The teacher didn't understand that this place would destroy her. That makes sense, but that is no longer your problem, Nivea replied with a smile. Looking at this self-confident girl, Edward realized that she had already calculated everything. He knelt down, agreeing to make a contract with her, and wondered if he had felt this way before. And strangely enough, he is not angry, but has quite strange expectations about it. Edward Spencer stood up, put his hands forward, and began to perform magic. The girl touched the teacher's palm with hers, and between them, a magic sign of agreement formed. As soon as their hands touched, the glow began to diminish, until a small glowing ring formed in its place. The contract is concluded, announced Edward Spencer, putting the resulting ring on his finger. The mage absorbs the mana that flows from the patient's body and places it in a temporary vacuum. Nivea began to fulfill her part of the agreement. The teacher must create the correct spell and pour mana into the empty body. This is the treatment for magic reflux. Edward listened to the girl with bated breath, as she said that common mages wouldn't be able to do something like this. But he was a completely different case. After all, he was the person who created this method. The man had already started thinking about what she had said, and the girl thought he must be a good brother. Edward Spencer can be a good person, so why was the teacher so harsh with her? Teacher, please convince my father. They want to sacrifice me, not make me an empress, Nivea asked in her 6th life, to which the teacher only replied that that was her destiny, and then she understood. Spencer insisted that even if she was a commoner, he was the king. It was better than pretending to be a princess. So, Nivea realized that it was the teacher who recommended her as a scapegoat. But she didn't want high status. She just wanted to be with her family. But because of her words, the teacher thought she was pathetic. Nivea believed the teacher had at least a little affection for her. If his feelings were sincere, he could fulfill her wish. She sincerely hoped it would be so. You have to accept this. They will soon become your family. Edward Spencer was firm, and his voice sounded without a single emotion. Then she realized her life was over. The desire to be loved and recognized, using mind control magic for this. It would be more effective for one who had many defects. To discover how to break the spells, she had to sacrifice her 7th life. Now that she had a mental barrier, Edward's level of magic wasn't enough. And in her 8th life, she was able to act completely according to her own will. Perhaps that's why this was her longest and most recognizable life. But in the end, even that didn't help. Love and family were just an illusion, and she had been drowning in them for too long. Hello, little one. A child's voice was heard, and right in front of her, in the empty hallway, was Wood. He couldn't even use his lousy brain, as the East Wing was out of bounds during her lesson. You thought I would leave it at that? The boy smiled. Nivea let out a tired sigh. She was waiting in the empty hallway and thinking about how to punish her. He was so proud of it that she even wanted to applaud him. Today I will kill you with my own hands, said Wood. And Nivea asked so quickly if he was really going to kill her, that the boy shuddered with fear. He hadn't said anything like that. But then, why did he hide there like a mouse and wait for her? Are you that pathetic? The girl laughed and her plan worked. Do you really want to die? Wood took a few steps towards her, shaking his fist. His actions didn't make any impression on Nivea. He hadn't changed at all. And she suggested that he kill her right now, knowing that in the near future, he wouldn't hesitate to commit murder. But now he was still a stupid, 10-year-old child. She incited him to try to kill her because his father would love it. And besides, a 10-year-old girl locked in a room throwing bugs at her couldn't bear the weight of murder. To incite him, Nivea took a step closer to him and Wood began to back away, feeling uncomfortable about it. But he kept threatening that he could kill her, but she had nothing to lose. She could endure death anyway. So the girl herself was the first to grab his hand. Then go ahead, kill me. She put his hand on her throat. Wood got scared, shouted for her to let go, and, shaking, suddenly performed water magic. In an instant, the girl found herself surrounded by water. Also, she was lifted into the air by a huge column of water. Wood, though surprised, still laughed, feeling superior. "Why were you so capricious? You look great," the boy mocked, while Nevia felt her body wouldn't obey. "Do you think water created with magic is the same as normal water?" "No, it contains my willpower," explained Wood, watching her squirm. And the girl realized that what she felt was very similar to what she felt when her carriage fell into the lake in her first life. She was killed by magic, it wasn't an accident. While Wood mocked her, assuring her he would kill her, Nevia wondered why this man possessed such powerful strength. She started to get angry. No, she cannot die here. In an attempt to escape the column of water, the girl waved her arms, and at some point this helped. From where the crescent moon was visible, barely perceptible lines diverged to the sides, and the magic surrounding the water pillar began to gradually disappear under the pressure of these new lines. Nevia realized that the black crescent moon had absorbed Wood's magic. A few moments later, the girl was free. She coughed for a long while, feeling that she could finally breathe deeply. Wood was perplexed. He started to tremble with anger, because this was impossible. The girl looked at him angrily. She wouldn't leave it like this and would definitely take revenge. "You can use magic of that kind," said an unknown voice, and Nevia realized the meaning of what was being said. She could use stolen magic. Realizing she had the power, she stood up with a jump and headed straight towards her brother. Calling him that, Wood was scared. His magic had disappeared because of her, but he couldn't lose it so easily. "Shut up, who is your brother here?" the boy yelled furiously, trying to overcome his fear. Water dripped from the girl's hair and clothes, but she said in a rather low voice that violence must be controlled with more violence. After all, that's what her father taught her, and she gestured with her hand towards her brother. Wood was drowning in the water, without the slightest chance to breathe. "How does it feel to be swallowed by the water?" Nevia asked, watching the boy struggle in the water column. She is not a mage, so she cannot maintain a constant flow of water, which means it will last as long as Wood himself can hold it. In that case, he won't die. That wasn't in the plans, but since it happened, we can take advantage of the situation. "Hang in there, brother," said Nevia, to the boy's surprise. And then she shouted loudly throughout the hallway, "Brother Wood. Brother Wood is trapped in the water. Brother Wood is in danger." Meanwhile, Duke Agnes studied the letter he had received and wondered sarcastically if she wanted to admire the new winter interior of the Empress's palace while drinking tea. But the letter also included a postscript. The Empress wrote that the Duke's adopted daughter, according to rumors, looked magnificent, and that she was also interested in knowing what family such a pretty person had been born into. Since Nevia's identity is suspicious, the Empress asks for a portrait of her biological family. The Duke realized she truly believes he is unaware of her intentions. He had already foreseen this outcome, so he prepared everything in advance. A knock was heard at the door, and Sir Spencer, Nevia's teacher, entered the room. The Duke invited him to sit, as he remembered that today was the day the teacher was to report on Nevia's academic progress. He asked how he was, and noted that today's class seemed to have ended earlier than usual. Edward Spencer. In turn, he asked if anything had happened that could have caused a strong psychological shock yesterday. "And why do you ask this?" asked Duke Agnes. A little earlier, when Nevia was leaving, she asked the teacher to tell her father that the mind control magic had weakened. After all, only in this way, whatever happens in the future, the teacher will be able to remain above all suspicion. It seemed like blackmail, but he had to follow her words, so, twisting the ring on his finger as a reminder of their agreement, Edward Spencer told the Duke that they had finished classes early today. Nick and Agnes assumed it was probably because of yesterday's fire, but in that case, what was he supposed to do at such an important moment when the Empress was beginning to take an interest in Nevia? Is no one other than his own son intervening? "It's not difficult. He just needs to free himself from his worries," said the teacher. The Duke was dissatisfied, even though Nevia had been placed in a room on the 3rd floor yesterday. Was that enough to calm him? Well, then he can easily solve this with material goods, new outfits, and accessories should help, and he can also invite her to a luxurious dinner. Then he told the teacher that it definitely wasn't difficult, and that he could relieve her of her worries. Suddenly, the room door burst open, and an excited voice shouted that something bad had happened. The young knight had fallen into a column of water. The Duke was very scared and hurried to the 1st floor. As soon as he arrived at the scene, Wood was already sitting on the floor, spitting out water that had gotten into his throat. Fortunately, the child was fine and got out of the water in time, so no serious problems arose. But the Duke was interested in how this could happen, especially at a time when entry to the East Wing was forbidden. The servants tried to justify themselves by saying that, just as Lady Nevia had said, the young master had summoned a column of water and had found himself trapped. The mention of Nevia, and the fact that she was nearby, made the Duke even angrier. In the East Wing, which was off-limits, Wood and Nevia were wet from head to toe. Something had definitely happened between them, as soon as he learned that the shock had weakened the mental magic, so he needed to remain calm. Something happened again. Perhaps this was a consequence of the weakening of the magic, and leaning over the girl, the Duke asked her what had happened and why she was soaked. The girl lowered her head and excitedly tried to explain what happened, ensuring that it was all her fault. She understood that he was trying to test the mind control magic. Despite the fact that his son was in such a state, first and foremost, he was testing her loyalty. "I asked my brother to show me magic," the girl said excitedly, feeling disgusted by the Duke's behavior. The man liked what she said. She was lying to protect Wood, which meant the mind control magic was still working. She wouldn't ask Wood to show his magic after he almost burned her on the ground yesterday. Nevia realized that the Duke was satisfied with her answer, but her true goal was not to reassure him. "Brother, are you okay?" The girl leaned over Wood, who was sitting on the floor, but the boy was not going to answer her. What's more, he became very angry. "It's your fault, monster. I'll kill you." He lunged at the girl, threw her to the ground, and began hitting her with his fists. But at one point, his hand was grabbed, and his father shouted, "What the hell are you doing?" The Duke tried to push his enraged son away, but the boy continued shouting that this bitch was trying to kill him, and that it was she who locked him in the water column. Wood shouted that she was the one who stole his magic, stole his water pillar, and used it against him. But the Duke listened to his son with disbelief. Could it be that Nevia was an imitation mage? Magic has two inflexible laws. The first is that a mage can develop an ability. The second is that magic, as we know, is passed down by inheritance. In this sense, imitation magic, capable of subduing any other, is an invaluable ability. Sending an imitation mage to the Empress would be a waste of time, so to confirm his son's words, the Duke approached the girl and extended his hand. No, he didn't feel any other magic around her, only Wood's magic. But how did it all happen then? What is the real truth? "I think I saw a blue light when my brother used magic, and he suddenly got trapped in the water," Nevia said at that moment. And suddenly, everything clicked for the Duke. It was just a mana explosion, an imitation mage. "You had to believe it," he said, turning to his son. The man reminded him to be careful and to watch out for mana explosions. There was no blue light. This scum lied. Father punished this scoundrel immediately. The boy screamed furiously. At that moment, the Duke turned to the girl, whose face was expressionless, and he promised her that Wood would be punished and that she should go rest. Wood kept screaming because his father didn't believe him either. As the girl slowly walked away down the hall, at one point she stopped. Wood looked like he was about to burst with anger because no one believed him, but he really thought it would be different. Nevia, turning around, smiled. The boy noticed her smile and got even angrier. He tried to lunge at the girl again, but the servants managed to hold him back. Then Nevia mentally asked him to wait, because the chaos in this family was just beginning. "Did you hear what happened in the East Wing?" "I have no words." There really was a water column there, and the rumors among the servants spread faster than the speed of light. The whispering maids suddenly fell silent as Nevia walked past them. They began to talk to each other, bewildered about whether she had always been this elegant. Despite the slippery shoes, her steps are straight and confident, and the wet hem made her simple dress look like exquisite velvet. There wasn't a single flaw, the very personification of elegance. The maids were so impressed by Lady Nevia's appearance. Charlotte brought her a towel, saying she must be cold. Nevia looked bewildered at the object in the maid's hands, then smiled and thanked her for her concern. She was so busy thinking about the black crescent moon that she didn't even realize how. Unconsciously, she began to follow etiquette, which sparked gossip among the maids. There is nothing strange about her behavior after all. She is learning everything. But until she leaves this place, it will be safer to live up to Nick's expectations. And Agnes, accompanied by Charlotte, the girl went up to the third floor, heading to her room. At one point, a child's voice called out her sister's name. "What are you doing here?" "This is the third floor," asked a little girl who was surrounded by haughty maids. It was Vivian, Duke Agnes's daughter, and although her question was quite innocent, It could definitely be taken as a rude comment. At that moment, the girl asked her maid Maki if it was really Sister Nevia. The woman answered affirmatively, and then she and the other maids laughed discreetly. "I'm sorry, Vivi, your maid's laughter was too loud, so I didn't hear you." Nevia approached her sister and asked her to repeat it, which caused the maids to literally shut up when they realized they had been called out for their behavior. Inappropriate. Vivi asked why she had come to the third floor, since her sister's room was on the second floor. "Maybe to see Vivi." So that's what you meant." Nevia smiled and explained that her father had also told her to use the third floor. The girl was delighted with this news. She was happy to be able to play with her sister every day and ran into Nevia's arms. But as soon as she touched her clothes, she immediately recoiled, feeling that she was all wet. And she felt very uncomfortable. The little one was a spontaneous girl and directly said it was disgusting, but Nevia didn't answer her. Then Charlotte tried to explain why this happened, but Nevia stopped her. After all, if she starts making excuses, she will find herself in a disadvantageous position. Vivian is the true Princess Agnes, whom she cannot blame for anything, because she is only a temporary replacement. Selfish and at the same time innocent, that was Vivian. At any convenient moment, she would entrust her sister with what she didn't want to do, assuring her that she would always help her and do whatever it took. However, Nevia always tried to be a good older sister to her. She treated her like real family, so she tried to take care of Vivi. However, the incurable disease would happen every time. Regardless of whether Nevia intervened or not, Vivian was always treated for magic reflux disease, while she herself died. From her first life to the last, each time she couldn't blame Vivian for it, but this time would be different. So with a light laugh, Nevia replied that she got all wet while playing with her brother in the water. "Why did you play without Vivi?" "You're a bad sister," said the girl, offended. She capriciously said she wanted to play too, but she replied that she would catch a cold. The maid Maki watched this whole dialogue with disgust. She knew that was a very ridiculous excuse. Of course, Nevia was playing with Lord Wood in the East Wing. That couldn't be true. She was a rival to an insignificant replacement. The maids tried to distract the little mistress by inviting her to play with her toys in the bathroom, but the capricious girl shouted that she wanted to play with her brother in the water too. "Vivi will play later. You won't be able to go to your brother's because he's a little busy right now." Nevia continued talking, realizing that the words about playing in the water hurt her a lot. Her plan worked. The girl shouted hysterically that that wasn't true, that she would go to her big brother right now and would ask him personally. The girl ran down the hall so fast that the maids could barely keep up. Maki managed to cast a disgusted look at Lady Nevia. In the blink of an eye, the hallway was empty, and only Nevia and Charlotte remained, watching the people leave. "How could they do this to you, my lady?" Especially Maki, Charlotte was angry, but Nevia said everything was fine, and that they would have to face this again and again. It was normal to feel offended and angry at such treatment, but she was already used to those looks full of contempt. Before continuing, Nevia asked the maid to bring her cold pumpkin porridge and tea for her father, and Charlotte accepted the order. But first, she would like to change the lady's clothes. The girl replied that she could do it herself, while the maid wondered what she planned to do if she wanted to invite the master to such a simple meal. The Agnes Duchy has an enormous fortune. Although it's just money, it's what determines Agnes's greatness. The water magic of this family is strong, but this ability is very limited. Unlike the Esselrids, who developed genius mages from generation to generation, the Agneses couldn't even boast of talent. However, to somehow compensate for this deficiency, the Agnes Duchy created a library with a large number of books. Although, apart from her, no one uses this place. Nevia was leafing through books to discover what kind of power this black crescent moon had. After learning about reincarnation, she read most of the books in the library, but she doesn't remember seeing anything about this ability. So, after gathering the necessary books, Nevia decided to look for some information in the extensive library of the Agnes Duchy. He was born with a superb body, a high social position, not to mention an innate ability for magic. The Duke reflected while his son raged. As the successor of Agnes, Wood is very similar to him when he was a child. "Bring that bitch here, I'm going to finish her off." The boy raged to himself. With his status, being angry at some commoner was quite idiotic. And this whole situation was very exhausting for Duke Agnes. "Brother, you were playing in the water with Sister Nevia. Why didn't you call me?" At that moment, little Vivian ran into the room. Nikken immediately approached his daughter and explained that her brother hadn't played with her. But at the same time, Wood's angry shout was heard, "Do you want to die?" The boy, without holding back, yelled at his sister to get out of there. The girl didn't understand why her brother was behaving like that and burst into tears because he wanted to kill her. The tears in his daughter's eyes made the Duke turn his frowning gaze towards his son. How dared he say something like that to his sister? He had crossed all boundaries. "Are you laughing at me?" The heir of Agnes shouted even louder. But the Duke, soothing his daughter's crying, tried to explain everything to his son, that she didn't know anything about what happened and that she was only 6 years old. The fact that his father was calming Vivi made Wood even more nervous. Because he only blamed him. "This scoundrel tried to kill me. Why are you on her side?" shouted the boy. But the man didn't get carried away by hysteria. His son had crossed the line too many times today, and he had to apologize, and if he didn't apologize, he wouldn't be able to count on his pocket money. Also, his allowance would be suspended, and he would also be forbidden from visiting the aristocrats yesterday. Wood was paralyzed. Why did he, the heir of Agnes, have to endure such humiliation? "I'm sorry, I was wrong," the boy replied in a low voice, while anger grew in his soul. "All because of that ragged woman. Come to your senses," the Duke ordered his son, leaving with his daughter in his arms. And he added to everyone else that if the recent events were to spread beyond this room, no one would escape punishment. After a while, Nikken returned to the office, where the butler reported that Sir Spencer had left earlier, assuring that he had seen or heard nothing of what had happened. Duke Agnes sighed wearily. Being constantly surrounded by that noise was very exhausting. At that moment, a maid knocked on the door with the message that Lady Nevia had sent him a snack, but that if the master wanted to rest, she would take it back, but the Duke allowed her to enter. Charlotte entered the office carrying a tray with a simple snack. Seeing the food on the tray, the butler hissed mentally. The master was no longer a small child to eat baby food. On the tray was oatmeal porridge made with cold herbal tea and pumpkin. The Duke looked at the tray with surprise, wondering why Nevia had ordered such low-quality food to be brought to him. Since the lady is still young, it seems she lacks knowledge. The butler tried to smooth over the awkwardness and offered to bring something else. But the Duke said it wasn't worth it and took some oatmeal with a spoon. As soon as his tongue felt the taste of the food, surprise crossed the man's face. He liked this yellow substance. Nikken thought it was much better than the expensive ones. And colorful children's treats from the chef. Taking a glass of juice, the Duke asked if this was what Nevia had told him to do. "Yes, that's right. The lady said you were probably hungry and asked me to prepare this particular snack." The maid replied. Duke Agnes smiled and even laughed slightly. Although Nevia is not his biological daughter, she fulfills the role of the ideal girl perfectly. Nevia is so mature at such a young age that, come to think of it, she needs new clothes and accessories for winter. The man commented, and he ordered Linden to commission dresses and necklaces from the Ashy boutique for her. The maid was surprised by the Duke's generosity, but replied that Lady Nevia would be happy, adding mentally that she had no normal clothes. Linden tried to object, but the Duke asked if there were any complaints about his decision, and the butler had to silently accept the master's order. Nevia was studying books in the library when a maid called her. Charlotte brought hot tea because she thought the lady was cold. The girl recounted how she brought a snack to the Duke and asked how the lady knew what the gentleman's preferences were. Charlotte was delighted. She had never seen the Duke eat pumpkin porridge, but Nevia couldn't say that was information from past lives. As a token of gratitude, the gentleman ordered clothes from Ashia. Aristocrats usually wait months for their orders, but for the Agnes family, the Ashis do everything in 2 days. The maid continued happily, and Nevia laughed, satisfied. It seemed she had achieved the desired effect. She never asked for anything at this boutique. They created clothes only for Vivian. "Sister, look, it's wonderful. No, my dad is the best. I'm the only one who owns the latest Ashi products," Vivian used to boast. And Nevia agreed that, of course, her father loved her very much. She herself wanted to wear an Ashi dress for her coming-of-age ceremony. "Oh, sister, yesterday I saw a clothing store that would be perfect for you," Vivian said cheerfully. She added that it was a store for commoners and that she didn't remember its name, but she was completely sure that Nevia would find many pretty outfits for herself there. And she didn't fail to mention that no one cares about her little sister, but she would look after her. Nevia naively thought that Vivian had been looking after her all this time. When she remembers that, she begins to understand that Vivian did it to show her who the only Princess Agnes is here. And I wonder if 6-year-old Vivian today is the same. Nevia called the maid by name, and she began to listen attentively. Charlotte, don't tell anyone about this, the girl said while leafing through another book she had in her hands. The maid accepted reluctantly, but still hoped she could at least boast a little. I'll kill her and I'll kill all of you too, Wood continued, enraged, and even an innocent plate was used. Philip's nanny burst into the room without knocking. She was clearly agitated by something. But upon seeing the young knight, the woman shuddered in surprise. The boy was trembling with anger. Furthermore, he was standing in the middle of the room with wet clothes. It wouldn't be long before he caught a cold. Why are you still standing there when the master is in such a state? Philip slapped the nearest maid and she began to scold him, saying that without her, they couldn't do anything normally, and that what had happened deserved for his nanny to leave for a little while. After putting the young knight in order, the woman listened to his complaints. The boy said that Nevia had tried to kill him and was perplexed because his father was on her side. She wanted you dead. We have to get rid of her now. Philippa was determined, but Wood couldn't do anything in this situation. His father promised to deprive him of his pocket money, and what was even worse, he blackmailed him with hunts and soirees. The woman was also about to burst with anger, low-born scum, as she had decided to go against the successor of the family, Agnes, and against her, the most devoted servant. How dare she speak of theft when she is not a full-fledged member of the Agnes family? Philippa believed that spending money on herself was natural. I can't live in the same house with a man who tried to kill me, continued Wood. Philippa decided to take advantage of the situation and assured the young man that they couldn't leave everything like that. She was sure that someone had told Nevia about her. It could have been the chef who had been stealing money with her. Charlotte also seemed suspicious. It seems they decided to join forces against her. Philippa needs to get the report book as quickly as possible and blame both of them for what is happening. Your nanny is willing to do anything for you. Do you understand? The woman bowed in front of the young knight, showing her affection. He should wait a little longer. Philippa will not stand idly by. She will never let him down. Nevia had been sitting over the books for hours, looking for at least something that could help her. But again, there was no information, so the girl saw no point in continuing the search. She stretched. She loosened her stiff body and realized she was very tired. In front of her was the last book, which spoke about gods outside the worlds. If reincarnation and the black crescent moon had any relationship with other gods, the other god represents human indifference to rights and wrongs, just as the meaningless existence of humanity is chaos, which has the ability to violate the statutes of the universe. Magic is closely connected with the universe, but there is a way to ignore it. Despite all its greatness, it has no power over life or death. But reincarnation erases the boundaries of these concepts, thus violating the laws of the universe. If Nevia is not mistaken, and her powers are effectively connected with other gods, does this mean that her true parents have secrets? Remembering her true parents, the girl froze for a second. The people who gave her to the orphanage, that's them. The only thing that indicated their existence was a card with their name, and they made a special effort to hide their origin. Well, they had the decency to give a name to the child they abandoned. After finishing with the books, Nevia yawned. After all, she hadn't found anything useful. Going out into the hallway, the girl bumped into Charlotte, who was surprised that her mistress wasn't asleep. The maid was glad she had no classes today and explained that, for some reason she didn't know, Sir Spencer had taken 3 days off, so the lady could rest well today. Nevia realized the teacher had gone to attend to her sister, and had a feeling that everything was just beginning. Aren't you hungry? Asked Charlotte, and before Nevia could answer, a growl came from her stomach. The girl asked for some hot soup, and Charlotte happily headed to the kitchen, offering to have some of the previous day's apple juice. Charlotte noticed the lady's unusual reaction to her words, and asked what had happened. Oh, thank you very much. Nevia blushed deeply, but her eyes shone with joy. The young girl's reaction made Charlotte feel a little happy, so the maid went to the kitchen, asking her to wait a little. Thinking about it, the lady rarely ordered juices and desserts. His lordship imposed strict restrictions on those things. Charlotte was a little scared because she would have to take it all secretly, but she had to bring a large portion for the lady. Entering the kitchen, the maid shuddered in surprise as there were people there. Oh, Charlotte, you came to get food for Lady Nevia, smiled Mackie, Lady Vivian's maid. Besides, the rest of the Duke's daughter's maids were also there, and Charlotte wondered why they were all there, since Lady Vivian didn't wake up that early. Answering that they seemed busy, Charlotte asked them not to worry about her and to do what they had to do. I'm so envious of Charlotte. Taking care of Lady Nivea's food doesn't require much effort, but we have to make an effort, pointed out Mackie. At that moment, the other maids laughed mockingly and cast meaningful glances at Charlotte. The girl realized what they were doing and wondered why there was so much apple juice. Lady Vivian was very kind to share her juice with us. It would be good to have more, right, friends? Mackie asked the other maids loudly. They realized that anyway, no one except their mistress drank it. So why not? But they suddenly remembered that Lady Nivea still hadn't tasted the apple juice. Charlotte knew where they were going with this, but she tried not to fall for their tricks. So she turned around and set about preparing food for her mistress. But as soon as she was back to the maids, Mackie gave an order to the other girl to add something. The maid poured something from a previously prepared bottle into the apple juice. Charlotte, bring some juice to your mistress. A glass with the drink was placed in front of her. With a wide smile, Mackie commented that everything would be fine. Charlotte must earn the lady's favor, because if in the future she marries a high-status noble, then she might give her something too. That's life, smiled Mackie, thinking that this farce would no longer ruin her mistress's mood. The maids insisted too much on asking Charlotte to bring juice for her mistress. Charlotte didn't like what Mackie was doing, but she still needed that juice. The lady would have been very happy, so the girl thanked the others for taking care of her too. I think you said you had a lot of food. How are you carrying it all? I'll help you, Charlotte volunteered and turned around while Mackie said that everything was fine and that there was no need to do this. Soon the dishes for Lady Vivian were completely ready, and all that was missing was to put everything on trays and take it away. Then Charlotte suggested placing one of the glasses on another tray to make it easier. But Mackie abruptly snatched the juice glass out of Charlotte's hand, assuring her they would do everything themselves. And then she put it on the tray with the others. Although there were already many there, Charlotte watched with bewilderment as the maids argued, one of whom said that her tray was about to fall, but Mackie assured her that it wasn't so bad. Charlotte herself placed only a little fruit and a piece of bread on her tray, which surprised the other maids. I took what I needed from Lady Nivea, explained the girl. Mackie smiled sweetly and said she felt very sorry for Charlotte, but Charlotte didn't listen to her end. Leaving the kitchen, she headed to Lady Nivea's room. As soon as the door closed behind her, the satisfied laughter of the maids was heard. Then they took their glasses of juice and clinked them, satisfied that they had succeeded. If the chef finds out we're drinking juice, we're finished. It's scary to even imagine it, really, said one of the maids, laughing without letting go of the glass. The others agreed, but the chef didn't return after going to the doctor. It seemed the medicine was taking effect. This was Mackie's plan, who noticed that the medicine would soon start taking effect on Lady Charlotte, so they had to leave the kitchen quickly. The girls grabbed the trays with the food and rushed towards the exit. Even if they arrived a little late, it wouldn't be a big deal, but still, it was better to hurry. Suddenly, one of the maids felt a sharp pain in her stomach and jerked awkwardly, so much so that the tray fell from her hands with a crash. What have you done? Miss Vivian fell asleep waiting to drink apple juice when she woke up. Mackie shouted at her. She was quite dissatisfied, but her feelings changed when she heard Laura talking barely aloud about her stomach. Charlotte had actually managed to switch the juice glasses. Daddy, what do we do now? What will we tell Lady Vivian? The maids asked worriedly, and one of them shouted that they shouldn't drink their portion either, that it might contain some medicine. Charlotte, you damn bitch. Mackie shouted in a fit of rage. Lady, wake up. Charlotte shouted at the girl because she suddenly fell asleep. Nivea could barely open her eyes, not understanding where she was. The maid realized that the mistress seemed to have caught a cold, so she also brought some medicine. She asked the lady to eat some soup and take some medicine and then continue sleeping. And I brought some apple juice, said Charlotte, and Nivea finally woke up. Charlotte actually brought her apple juice, which she had never tried. I've tasted apples several times, but I had never drunk juice from them. She took the glass with both hands, surprised at how big it was, and took a few sips. As soon as her tongue felt the flavor, the girl was happy that something could be so delicious. The maid asked with a smile how the mistress liked the juice upon seeing her reaction. She didn't answer that it was very tasty. Finally, she tasted it and recognized the flavor of apple juice. Then the girl looked intently at her maid and suggested she try it too. Although I am a common, ordinary juice and an expensive drink for the common man, it is still not so expensive that the maid can never taste it. Lady Nivea had never drunk juice, and although she wanted to share it with her, Charlotte was glad she had brought it. And with a smile, she offered the lady to drink it herself. Nevia even felt some joy. A day without classes, and with the taste of apple juice, it was as if it were her birthday. But the glass was nothing like the one usually used for juice. It was too big and heavy, as she commented to the maid. Oh, that glass was prepared by Lady Vivian's devoted maids. However, the three of them were acting suspiciously in the kitchen, and although the juice was for the young lady, she had no intention of drinking it, explained Charlotte. She thought they had done something to Nevia's drink, so when she returned, she swapped the glass for another. Perhaps if she had met the deadline Mackie had given her, the lady would have had a stomach ache. And Nevia thought about it. It seemed that the juice Mackie had given Charlotte had probably been drunk by someone else, and the maid confirmed that that was probably the case. Nevia got out of bed and headed to the table, where next to the food was a small bottle of medicine, to which the maid added that before drinking the medicine, the mistress should eat. Charlotte was horrified when Nevia took the medicine and poured it into the juice. The girl suggested that she simply didn't want to take the bitter medicine, but in that case, the taste of the juice would be too strange. Suddenly, Charlotte heard the sound of the door opening, and the butler entered the room, accompanied by the same maid, Maka. What happened? The girl asked, surprised by the fact that they entered without even knocking. Listen, butler, this is the glass that was in the kitchen when she left. I noticed one of them was missing. She immediately started blaming Maki. Charlotte commented that it was strange that Mackie changed her mind after giving her the juice for her mistress, and she was indignant because Charlotte was trying to blame her for everything. How low, especially considering it was you who stole it, exhaled the red-headed maid. The butler had already started scolding Charlotte for her actions. Even if it was for the mistress, she doesn't know she is acting against the master's will. Also, she mixed our juice with some stomach-upset medicine, asked what happened to Laura. So here is your answer, added Mackie, horrifying Charlotte. Mackie exclaimed theatrically, what would have happened if Lady Vivian had drunk that juice? But the butler knew all the tricks of these women very well, and would not let everything go according to Mackie's plan. He would have to send Charlotte to the laundry later and find out what really happened. Because of that, Lyndon replied to Charlotte that it was enough for him to hear that she had gone against the master's will to understand her disloyalty. And that's why he was sending her to the laundry now. Their conversation was interrupted by a sound from Lady Nevia, and everyone turned around in fear. Stomach. The girl trembled slightly, pressing her hands against her stomach. It hurt a lot. Charlotte ran to the mistress. She was very worried because she gave her normal juice. So why was the mistress sick? Suddenly, the girl remembered what had happened a couple of minutes ago. How a girl added medicine to a juice, and now she understands what it was for. Mackie, you didn't just give me juice, shouted Charlotte, understanding the mistress's intention. Mackie shuddered at the accusations. There was only one glass of juice, with medicine, and Laura drank it. So why did this fake have a stomach ache? What nonsense are you saying? The juice was fine. She replied. Also, she continued to accuse Charlotte, who was listening with complete calm, of having taken the medicine carelessly, and of wanting to poison Lady Vivian. Charlotte understood that Mackie was starting to get nervous, because her mistress's plan was the same as the maid's, who now had nothing to object to. How do you know the stomach medicine was only served in one glass? Besides, Mackie, how do you know the medicine was served in the juice? Charlotte asked, and the maid realized her mistake, but continued saying that Charlotte herself brought the juice, and that everything would be fine. Butler, the fact that juice was brought to the lady must remain a secret, otherwise it will cause her even more problems. Charlotte turned to Lyndon and he agreed. You say it hurts because of the juice. Let me drink some too, and then we'll find out the truth. Mackie shouted, grabbing the glass. She took a few quick sips, despite Charlotte's protests, but as soon as she tasted it, her eyes widened in horror, wondering why there was medicine in that glass, and why Laura felt sick then. My mistress has never drunk apple juice. She doesn't even know what it's supposed to taste like, Charlotte pointed out reasonably, and added that, upon seeing how sick she was, she realized that there was something wrong with that juice. I think you need to explain yourself, Mackie, Lyndon said to the maid, who kept saying that Laura also had a stomach ache after drinking the juice. Where is that glass? You must have strong evidence, since you came here and even called the butler. Charlotte said, and Mackie had absolutely nothing to say in response, and realized she had fallen into her own trap. The only thing she could think of was that the juice was made from old fruit, and she hadn't thought about that before. Lyndon was unhappy, about having to waste time on all this these days. The knight was not at his best due to recent events. If this incident reached his ears, he would surely get very angry. Maki, take full responsibility and bring a doctor for Lady Nevia. If after this you make one more mistake, then I will no longer cover for you, said the butler. And the maid could only accept obediently. Before she could lift her head, Charlotte's voice was heard asking when she would call the doctor. Yes, I understand, replied Maki, trying to contain her anger and shut the door hard. The butler told Charlotte that he would turn a blind eye if she acted against her master's will, and expressed his hope that that would not happen again. He also remembered that tomorrow morning, the orders from the Ashi boutique will be delivered here, specifically costumes and jewelry for Lady Nevia. Charlotte was glad they had resolved the situation. If the gentleman found out, the problems would have no end. But out loud, the girl only flattered the butler, saying that he was the only one who cared so much for her mistress, and that he would also cover up her mistake, and asked him how she could repay him. This type of help doesn't cause much trouble. There's no need to worry so much. The butler coughed shyly and hurried out of the room. After seeing the butler off, the girl returned to her mistress and was very surprised by what she saw. Charlotte poured the juice into the pot, asked Lady Nevia, who felt no pain. Charlotte had planned to do just that, so she quickly poured the juice into the flower pot. And Nevia smiled. It was quite interesting. The next morning, messengers from the boutique arrived at the mansion, and the butler received them personally. Showing them where to take their purchases, he ordered them to take everything to the third floor, which one of the maids overheard. She ran to Lady Vivian's room with the message that gifts from the Ashi boutique had arrived for her. The master cares so much for you because he loves Our Lady more than anything in the world. The maids warned, smiling. The girl was incredibly happy to hear this. Yesterday she was very sad about her brother and also couldn't drink her juice, and decided that that's why her father was sending Vivi many gifts so she wouldn't be sad. Vivian immediately wanted to call her sister to show her what her father had given her, and Maki just nodded in agreement, letting the fake feel how much more important her mistress was to her master. When will my gifts arrive? The girl said impatiently. Laura offered to go check, and Maki added that she should also check if there were rats coming out of the next room. But as soon as the maid looked into the hallway, she let out a cry of surprise. Maki asked what happened, but Laura froze, hesitant. Meanwhile, further down the hallway, some messengers asked if they could bring gifts from Duke Agnes, and Charlotte allowed it, since the gifts were for Lady Nevia. Maki couldn't believe her eyes. It couldn't be that an order from such an expensive boutique had arrived for this disgusting forgery. Tired of waiting, Vivian also stepped out into the hallway, asking the maid what had happened. Why are they bringing gifts? Are they for Vivi? The girl didn't understand. She silently approached the room where they were bringing the gifts and looked inside. There she saw Nevia calmly drinking and was very surprised. Vivian remembered that her sister had recently said that she would also live on the third floor, which meant that was her room. In that case, it turns out these gifts are for Sister Nevia and not for Vivi. Ah, Vivi, you've come. Nevia smiled upon noticing the girl. Suddenly, Vivian remembered what her sister had said. She said she would marry Prince Aries on behalf of Vivi. The sister took Vivi's place. Upon realizing this, the girl turned sharply and ran to her room. Vivian ran in terror, thinking that her little sister had appeared to cause her trouble. The girl slammed the door of her room so hard that the maids were startled. Get out of here now. Vivian screamed. Nevia stood in her room, bewildered. Charlotte knew that Lady Vivian's maids didn't supervise her behavior, but she didn't think she would be so arrogant. While the maid was lost in her thoughts, her gaze fixed on something, wondering why the employees of such a popular boutique had those expressions on their faces. Nevia was also confused by the silence, so she turned to them and asked them what had happened, and did so quite elegantly, so much so that the young men were literally blinded by the lady's radiance. The lady is still here. What are you doing? Charlotte coughed, encouraging the employees to continue. She started to get angry. Perhaps they wanted to show their rudeness that way, but the men immediately came to their senses and apologized. They finished everything, so they rushed to leave the mansion. When everyone had left, Charlotte asked if the lady was going to turn a blind eye to Lady Vivian's attitude towards her. She was worried that in the future, this could lead to not very good consequences. The adopted daughter, who came from humble nobility, received things she didn't deserve. And after Vivian's heart was broken, Nevia became her hated and villain sister. If Nikken had prepared Vivian for all this from the beginning, such a misunderstanding would not have happened. So Nevia decided to leave everything as it was. Duke Agnes is an arrogant man. She knows it like the back of her hand and has to accept it as a fact. So Vivian can stay as she is. Besides, it's Vivian and Wood, after all. The discontent among their servants began to grow. They will doubt the decisions of the Duke, who decided to adopt Nevia, which will subsequently affect the Duke's arrogance, and will cause a rift among the people of the House of Agnes. Meanwhile, Charlotte counted the gifts in total. More than 30 gifts were brought to Lady Nevia. The Ashy Boutique is none other than the exclusive property of Agnes, and these gifts mean they treat their mistress like a princess. The pleased maid offered the girl to open some of the boxes, but Nevia considered the whole thing a show. The Duke thinks that if he sends her several expensive outfits, she will cry with happiness. But Nevia still opened one of the boxes. Charlotte was delighted. All the outfits were so cute and of high quality. She took one of the dresses in her hands, continuing to admire the Duke's gifts. And then she presented it to her mistress, testing it lightly. Anyway, Nevia hadn't shown much enthusiasm for the outfit, and trying on one of them only contributed to the strange atmosphere. The dress was so bright, elegant, and cute that even Charlotte felt embarrassed. "It seems he just gave me what he was preparing for Vivian," said the girl. And the maid, looking at the mountain of gifts, also realized that they all adapted the dressing style of Lady Vivian to Lady Nevia. These outfits were too childish and also too wide. "I'll put them together later." The girl quickly gathered the gifts, feeling uncomfortable. Among the gifts, there was a small box with a decoration. It seems the butler mentioned something about it. Did it seem that this hairpin was the only gift of all that suited Lady Charlotte? She didn't know what to do with it, so she left the box on the table, determined to somehow improve the lady's mood. Charlotte offered to bring the lady some orange marmalade and buns, and Nevia accepted, which pleased the maid. The maid hurried to the kitchen, and the girl exhaled slightly. She shouldn't worry about those trivialities anymore, because there are only 2 days left until she escapes from there. The reason Nevia signed a contract with Eduardo for only 5 days was due to the Empress's letter. Once Vivian's illness is cured, the Duke will definitely accept the offer to exchange her with Vivian. However, when Nicken is not at home, Wood will take her out of the mansion, after which she will be able to meet with Esselred. Duke Lark Esselred. Nevia had never seen him in her entire life. He didn't even answer the Emperor's call. They say that when the 8-year-old prince arrived, the duchy magically turned black, and only rumors reached Nevia about Esselred's mansion. But why is he so resistant to showing his face? Rumors about his poor health don't sound very convincing, thought the girl. Since almost nothing is known about him, everyone is afraid to get in touch with him. But even when the duchy was in decline, Prince Creed emerged as the successor of Esselred. It seems it was at the 8th Imperial Ball, when her engagement to Prince Ares was broken. By the way, Princess Agnes can no longer be the successor. They whispered quite loudly to the aristocrats. At that time, rumors about Nevia were spreading like wildfire throughout high society. She saw Prince Creed for the first time after an unpleasant event that happened that very day at the ball. Her dress was dirty from the drink that had been spilled on it. Although Nevia tried to hide in a place where no one should come, someone appeared there. This man protected her from her pursuer with his broad back and told her openly to leave that place. Indifferent blue eyes, a cold expression on his face that makes it impossible to predict his thoughts. "You are Princess Agnes?" the young man asked, and Nevia felt a simply dazzling atmosphere. She saw him so close for the first and last time that she bowed and greeted Prince Creed. "It's fine, but now I am not Prince Creed, but the successor of Esselred," replied the young man, turning around. Seeing his back move away, Nevia thought he was too grumpy. After a couple of steps, Creed stopped suddenly, as if remembering something. "This cape, you can use it." He handed her the thing and left immediately. Nevia didn't do what he said for fear of unnecessary rumors, but she still kept the cape. Because in her whole life, that was the only time someone helped her. Nevia doesn't know when Creed will appear in the Duchy of Esselred, but as soon as it happens, he will give her the title of successor and will leave until she is completely independent. She must survive somehow. At that moment, noises and shouts were heard in the hallway that Lady Vivian had fainted, and Nevia realized that she was already heartbroken. All those who hate Nevia like Philip will try to harm her in every possible way. "Well, then the only thing I can do is give them a reason to do it," said the girl, taking the box from the table. Duke Agnes ran to his daughter's room, worried about her condition. The girl was lying in bed, with her eyes closed and breathing with difficulty. The doctor explained that this happened because she was going through severe psychological stress. So first it was necessary to get her out of that state. Upon hearing about the stress, Nikken thought that Vivian was jealous of Nevia. He was not happy because his daughter had fallen so low because of some gifts. Prince and Nevia's engagement was just around the corner. So what if the Empress found out about the problems inside the house? At first it was a small conflict between children, but if everything had been that way, the problem could have been solved a long time ago. Then why can't they live in peace for even a day? So you weren't looking after Vivian while all this was happening. The Duke turned his gaze towards his daughter's numerous maids. Mackie bowed her head and asked for forgiveness, but the Duke's voice was terrifying. Do you think I need your apology? The Duke was furious. The maid was trembling with fear. But even if she seemed impartial, she would definitely be finished. So she admitted her mistake, but added that this time they really couldn't do anything. To hurt Lady Vivian, Lady Nevia opened the door wide and left it open while the gifts were being brought in, said Mackie. The Duke didn't expect to hear this, and his face softened slightly. The maid added that 2 days ago, Lady Nevia deceived her mistress, saying she played with the younger master. And all this to anger the lady. Nikken couldn't believe that Nevia had been the one to provoke first, but nevertheless, what happened happened. He would have doubted it if she were a normal child, but she was under the effects of mind control magic. And Nevia simply couldn't do such a thing. He was wrong about Nevia, or the maid was deceiving him. In that tense situation, suddenly the voice of a girl calling her father was heard. Turning around, Duke Agnes saw Nevia in the room, looking quite upset. The girl tried to tell her father something, which made the red-headed maid literally shudder with rage. Mackie noticed that Nevia was holding a small box against her, and a plan formed in the woman's head. She smiled and asked what Lady Nevia was holding in her hands. And then she herself answered her question that it was a box that had been recently brought from the Ashy Boutique. Without letting the girl say a word, even though you know why Lady Vivian fainted, you still carry gifts with you, said the maid with feigned incomprehension. Or maybe the lady brought it to comfort her, but it seems she is challenging her. What do you mean Nevia is challenging the lady? Philip's nanny burst into the room as always. Without knocking, the woman was beside herself with rage at what this little creature had done again. Philippa couldn't believe that Lady Vivian was the true noble Agnes, since Nevia could provoke her. I didn't do it. The girl tried to justify herself, but the nanny was glad she was making excuses because that was exactly what she wanted. Now the Duke could see the true face of this scoundrel, no matter how you look at it. All the evidence is now against her, because making noble people sad is a very bad act. Well, let's see then what you want to give Lady Vivian. The woman snatched the box from the girl's hands. In the confusion, the box fell to the floor and opened, and a hairpin rolled out of it. A frustrated Nevia lowered her head, while the nanny scolded her for being so insolent for having received so many gifts. But only having brought this, the woman was sure that, due to her greed, the girl could not part with all the valuables, and only brought a cheap hairpin. It seems it's an ashy gift that they sent as a bonus. Mackie intervened in the conversation. And then the word spread among the servants that even Lady Vivian's simplest hairpin was not as cheap as the one she had just brought. Nevia remained with her head bowed, trying to show sadness with her whole appearance. But deep down, she was indignant that the nanny was saying all those words to an 8-year-old girl. After all, she should be the one who has the right to criticize them all. Duke Agnes watched the unfolding scene in silence. At that moment, Nevia took a slight step forward and leaned forward elegantly. And ease. She reached out to pick up the fallen hairpin. Father, the only thing I need from those gifts is this hairpin, said the girl, hugging the jewel. And she asked if she was really being too greedy, which left Philippa and Maki speechless. Nikken was also shocked by Nevia's behavior. A few seconds ago, it seemed she was being condemned to death, but now it was as if she had become a different person. Everything went according to Nevia's plan. They are still condemning her for the gifts she accepted from the boutique. She considers it outrageous that the main target of these condemnations is an 8-year-old girl. But in the end, everything will work only in her favor, because it was her, a girl of the lower nobility, who received so many expensive gifts. I apologize for my greed, but I am still very happy now, said the girl in a low voice. She had no time for emotions, because Nikken was not yet completely convinced. And although she said in a sad voice that those were gifts from her father, and that's why she was greedy, in reality she was not sad. She barely restrained herself from laughing at their stupidity. No. No, definitely now was not the time to laugh. The girl tried as best she could to look sad. Clutching the hairpin to her, she said that was all she wanted and promised not to ask for anything else in the future. Bitter tears ran drop by drop down the girl's cheeks. Duke Agnes looked in astonishment at his adopted daughter. He didn't understand why he was worried about this child's feelings. There is no longer a need to look at this image. The mind control magic hasn't weakened. As a person who knows all kinds of techniques for political fighting, he doesn't see a drop of falsehood in this child. Now the problems that worried him before are not important. What is more important is what he saw. The ideal noble etiquette that only the highest nobility can achieve was not wrong when he decided to make her his adopted daughter. What are you saying? Nevia, you're Princess Agnes. This status means your full right to want and do whatever you want, said the Duke. Since this decision was made by none other than Nick and Agnes, it couldn't be wrong. But the girl almost laughed. She was Princess Agnes. She could want more. The girl sobbed, insisting that it was all her fault, but wondered what had made him change his mind. If he had really forgotten the mockery and sarcasm that had reigned there recently. Meanwhile, the Duke decided to find out the true reason for all that commotion. His gaze fell on Philippa, who shuddered with rage because, in her opinion, Nevia had managed to deceive her master. Sir, please don't believe her. It's all a game. She wants to get away with it, the woman said, insisting that Nevia was simply trying to hide her guilt. The nanny was sure that if the Lord had been a witness, he would have discovered what she was really like. The Duke asked her what she meant, and the woman hesitated, scolding herself for her thoughtless words. There was no evidence of theft, but in a situation like this, it would have been very bad if she had raised the issue of embezzlement. I'm sorry, all this happened because I didn't look after you well, the woman bowed. But Duke Agnes had already found the culprit of the situation and was not going to leave things like that. So he asked how she could blame Nevia. It seems I trusted you too much. The Duke's voice took on a metallic tone, and he unsheathed his sword with a metallic clang. He trusted him so much that even the maids started lying to him. The tip of the sword pointed directly at Maki. Sir, it seems I have misunderstood everything. This is a misunderstanding. The maid immediately dropped to the floor in front of the knight. Philippa also bowed in fear, insisting that she had made a mistake. The woman consoled herself with the thought that sooner or later, they would find the kitchen ledger with the expenses, and then everything would be different. But for now, she was asking for forgiveness and another chance, but the Duke's sword remained firm. Dad, a scared voice was heard, and Nicken shuddered. Vivian woke up and rubbed her eye, asking why everyone was gathered in her room. The girl rubbed her eyes vigorously, trying to understand what was happening. And when she saw the naked sword in her father's hands, she screamed in fear. Dad, why are you trying to kill Maki? Vivian shouted in horror and begged them not to kill her maid and nanny. The Duke had to put away the sword so as not to upset his daughter even more. I understand, so don't cry, Vivi. If you cry, you will faint again. The man stroked the girl's head. Nevia realized that, after all, he was a loving father. The Duke then announced that the gifts Nevia had received were hers alone, and that she shouldn't return them, so the girl thanked him and hurried back to her room. Duke Agnes informed the guilty servants that Vivian had saved their lives, and Vivi's father told her that she shouldn't be jealous of Nevia because she had received a gift, and promised her that he would buy her many more things that would be much better than those. Having resolved the situation, after a while, the Duke informed the butler that he was heading to the imperial palace, and ordered them to prepare clothes for him. Now they will be able to reduce lobbying costs before the Empress. Until Nevia fully mastered etiquette, he postponed the engagement and enriched the Empress with magic stones that brought her joy. But what he saw today exceeded all his expectations. Vivian calmed down. It seemed that yesterday's warnings hadn't been in vain. Would also calm down, the Duke thought, but nevertheless there is nothing wrong with caution. So the Duke ordered that additional guards be assigned to his son. Upon returning to her room, Nevia felt extremely tired, as if she were on a battlefield that would never end. Rubbing her eyes, the girl convinced herself to have patience a little longer. The power to steal and use someone else's magic is a sign that confirms the ninth life. The ninth her last life, but is it really life? Feeling sick, the girl collapsed to the floor, right in the hallway. The pin fell from her hands, her shattered and insignificant trophy. The result of fighting alone is like defending yourself with a spear and a shield among many swords pointing at you. There is still a lot of time ahead, and she must prepare well, she must put aside unnecessary thoughts and act more decisively. However, the heart wears out, emotions and the mind cloud over. It's okay, she has lived the same life 9 times, so maybe something went wrong. But she can't stop there and doesn't have time to get carried away by emotions. Yes, everything is fine, the girl said quietly to herself. She is safe and sound, everything is fine with her. Having calmed her thoughts and her heart, Nevia entered her room. But as soon as she crossed the threshold, she shuddered. Charlotte was lying unconscious on the floor. "Where have you been lurking since you arrived?" Wood asked in a bored voice. The boy smiled maliciously and ordered someone behind him to hit her. A dull sound was heard, and Nevia realized she was falling, while at the same time realizing that her consciousness was fading. "God, even her maid is annoying," the young knight commented discontentedly, and then ordered 2 servants to lock the maid in one of the abandoned warehouses, and the third to take the penniless princess and follow them. Wood had planned to take Nevia to a secluded place and have a good fistfight while his father wasn't watching, and he had spent a lot of time yesterday looking for a place to do it. In a few hours, she will be crying and begging him to save her life. The remaining servant asked again if they were sure no one would see them, and Wood replied irritably that they would have to go out through the balcony to do it. The young master sent his servant to wait outside, and he himself extended his hands, performing water magic. With its help, Wood moved the unconscious Nevia, not worrying about hitting her anywhere, because he is the one who actually has the higher status and will show her the real truth. Soon they arrived at an inconspicuous barn deep in the forest, and Wood ordered the servant to leave Nevia there. After taking the girl to the barn, the young knight smiled in anticipation. The only thing he wanted now was to hit her and leave many bruises in places where his father couldn't see. "Young master, we have a problem. You need to return to your room right now." The servant's worried voice interrupted him. He reported that the Duke had assigned a knight to watch over the young master. "Why do I need a knight?" Wood said indignantly, angry that his entertainment had been interrupted. And in response, he heard that his father did this because he was leaving for the imperial palace. But Wood was not very upset. He would just need to get rid of the knight and carry out his plan. Determined to return first, he left Nevia left on the dirty floor of the barn, ordering them to close the door tightly. "Ow, how could the knight do this to me?" Philippa was nervous in her room. She was, after all, the most devoted servant for all these years. "It's all this girl's fault. This scoundrel deceived the master." "It's okay, everything will be back to normal soon," promised the woman who had a plan prepared. A knock was heard at the door, and a man with a hood over his eyes brought what she wanted. Finally, the ledger. Now everything will go according to her plan, and this scoundrel will pay for everything. The only thing she would have to do would be to write Charlotte's name in the empty boxes, and also put some decorations in that girl's room. According to what is written here, she also planned to take care of the chef. "Sir, you must see this," said Philippa, entering the Duke's office. But instead of Duke Agnes, Butler Linden sat at the table, who said that the knight had gone to the imperial palace. The woman was angry because the Duke was absent at such an important moment for her, but she understood that, in his absence, the butler had to manage the house's affairs. Then he would have sufficient authority to stop those who were engaged in theft. "Butler, remember I said I argued with Lady Nevia," the woman began, and taking out the notebook, she explained that the argument was actually about that. Linden took the notebook and began to flip through the pages in bewilderment. Some time passed before the man carefully read the written lines and realized what it was. "It's impossible. You mean the chef was stealing from Agnes?" the man shouted, jumping from his seat. Philippa confirmed that it was a ledger indicating that the money was given as child support, and that the chef wasn't the only one doing it. His accomplice was Charlotte, Lady Nevia's personal maid, and to cover it up, Lady Nevia tried to blame the nanny for everything. Linden listened attentively to the woman, realizing the magnitude of the incident. Philippa didn't care if she could win over this girl with the help of the ledger, but she needed public opinion so that everyone would know Nevia's true face. And then they would have the opportunity to take revenge on her with the help of the emerging controversy. "What does all this mean?" exclaimed the humiliated chef, to which Linden replied that the administration had found evidence of theft in the ledger, and that it was better not to deny it. At that moment, the guards attracted the butler's attention to what they found in the chef's room. It clearly raised questions. These things were found in Charlotte's maid's room. One of the guards was holding jewelry wrapped in a handkerchief. Linden couldn't believe all this was happening, but he had to solve it. so he ordered Charlotte to be brought in. However, the guards had already searched the entire mansion and couldn't find her. And this news also puzzled Philippa. How Charlotte managed to hide so quickly, of course. It makes no sense to prove an attempted theft with a few pieces of jewelry, because something like that can be easily solved, but no one except Philippa knew what would happen. It seems she realized we were looking for her and ran away. We have to find her, the woman said. Lyndon wondered, Charlotte yesterday and Charlotte today, because all the problems that have been happening in the last few days have a connection with her. In any case, we have to resolve this situation before the master returns. If we tell him that the servant who stole the money has escaped, his head will roll. When it was already completely dark, the guards reported that they had found Charlotte. But there was a problem. Something strange was happening to the girl. She was locked in an unused storage room, which was also locked from the outside. From this, the butler realized that someone wanted to frame Charlotte and, therefore, locked her up. Philippa was bewildered by the complexity of everything. Maybe it was the chef. He locked her up because he wanted to blame her for all this, the woman suggested. Lyndon thought that this was too strange a way to expose himself. The guard also added that they searched the entire mansion several times. But they cannot find Lady Nevia. So, you mean an unknown person spent the money and wrote down someone else's name? Nicken asked in a tired voice. Nevia also disappeared, and her maid, whose name was written in the book, was found unconscious in an abandoned warehouse. What kind of infantilism is this? He was enraged. The Duke just wanted to talk to the Empress about the ceremony, so why is this happening? Duke Agnes ordered Nevia to be found, even if it meant turning the whole capital upside down. When Nevia opened her eyes, she didn't understand where she was. It was dark and everything was swimming before her eyes, and she also felt pain throughout her body. Damwood ignored Nicken's promise and did this. So, first she needs to calm down, and she won't find a solution if she's nervous. They didn't gag her or tie her hands, and there are no frames either, which means she was kidnapped and locked in some room, but since Wood hasn't done anything yet, it seems there are some problems. However, Nevia couldn't sit idly by waiting for Wood to appear after taking off his clothes. The girl began to look around as much as possible in the complete darkness. There was a smell of mold and dampness. She felt the heavy boxes and realized that it was an unused storage room. To Wood's credit, he tried to find a suitable place. The girl moved clumsily, causing the heavy box to move with a creak. And Nevia got scared. She will be in trouble if there is security outside. But everything around was quiet. And that was good. She should explore the area. Maybe she would find something useful. No matter what situation you are in, there always is and will be a way out. Time passed, and at some point the girl heard birds singing outside. It seems it's already dawning, and there is more clarity. Nevia felt her head spinning, and blood pulsing strongly in her temples. The girl realized that she hadn't eaten since the previous morning, and was also cold. The situation, undoubtedly, was not easy, but she had to keep looking if she didn't find something before Wood returned. The situation would get worse. Continuing to feel the space around her, Nevia bumped into something and realized it was a door. Naturally it was locked, but maybe she could knock it down. Having accelerated to the maximum in the confined space, the girl hit her shoulder against the door with all her might. But nothing happened. What should she do? The door won't open even a millimeter. Although she has good health, she still won't be able to defeat Wood by force, and besides, now she is very weak. No matter how, she had to get out of there before Wood returned. Sitting on the floor, Nevia felt something damp under her hand. She couldn't understand why it was damp there, but if she thought about it, it had rained a few days ago. So maybe it was rainwater that had leaked in. But if that was the case, then why was it damp only in one place? Moving the box from under which a puddle had come out, Nevia was pleased with what she saw. There, behind the box, in the very corner of the room, there was a huge hole. Looking inside, she wondered if she could get out of there. It seemed like she would barely be able to pass. Meanwhile, Wood, accompanied by a servant, was heading slowly towards that very barn. He wasn't happy, because the house had been turned upside down during the night. But fortunately, the father could only find the maid. In any case, he would have to threaten the servants so that they wouldn't tell that he had kidnapped Nevia. As everyone approached the building, the nearby bushes suddenly started to move. Wood's eyes widened in surprise when he saw the reason for the movement of the vegetation. "How did you get out?" The boy shouted when he saw Nevia crawling out from under the bushes. He shouted at the servant to catch the girl, and she, without losing time, ran away. The girl ran with all her might, but her weakness was already making itself felt. And in a matter of moments, the servant grabbed the fugitive and lifted her up. Nevia wasn't going to give in so easily, so she pulled a hairpin out of her hair and turned abruptly. She plunged the sharp end of the ornament directly into the leg of the man who grabbed her. The servant doubled over in pain and released the girl from his arms. Wood was already running after them, cursing the careless servant. He must catch the girl. If he loses her, everything will be over. Wood threw his hand forward abruptly and used his magic. When the water touched Nevia, it seemed to wrap around her like a net, forcing her to stop. Ha ha ha. This is true strength, unlike your stupid antics, the boy laughed. He approached her, mockingly telling her that she would never defeat him, even if she managed to steal his magic once. You can't escape, idiot. Wood grabbed Nevia by the neck. He was sure that without magic, she was no match for him. Nevia grabbed his hands, trying to free herself from the grip on her neck. And as soon as she touched Wood's hands, she felt something unusual. The wind died down. Wood froze. He raised his fist to hit her, as if time had stopped. No, the girl realized. It didn't stop, but slowed down, because the fist continued to approach her slowly. But firmly. She looked the boy in the eyes full of hatred and contempt. She had once looked at them for such a long time. Still holding his hand, the girl laughed with satisfaction. Now she can say with confidence that she is capable of stealing her opponent's magic. Not just magic, but by touching him, she can even absorb his abilities. Wood didn't understand what was happening, but he could see that something was wrong. And only when I saw blue flashes of magic in the girl's red eyes did I realize that this was a sign of a mana explosion. That was it. Nevia had absorbed all of Wood's magic, and he realized it, which was reflected in the fear in his eyes. In an attempt to save himself, he pushed the girl, but it was already too late. The effects of a mana explosion are weakness and coughing up blood. But it doesn't matter because the black crescent moon does not obey these rules. Nevia smiled, enveloped in blue flashes. You should have fled sooner, idiot, she said, raising her hand, and then a terrible noise was heard. Meanwhile, Nikim heard again from the guards that they hadn't found Nevia. He didn't understand why so many problems had occurred lately. Even if there had been similar cases before, they had been resolved quite quickly. If they don't find Nevia, the ceremony will have to be cancelled. How much money will be needed to cover the losses? Where else could he find a similar girl? The maid who was standing nearby suddenly let out a gasp upon seeing something outside the window. Looking in the same direction, Nikin was surprised, and then his eyes widened in horror. A bright light shone through the window, and a powerful energy was felt in the air. But what kind of energy was it? A little further away, a huge column of water could be seen, spinning like a tornado. But this was impossible because there was no sea nearby. Nikin was surprised to realize that he definitely recognized that energy. It was the energy of his son Wood, but he definitely didn't have that power. As soon as the Duke ran to the scene, he stood frozen in astonishment. The magic energy is thick, like fog on the shore of a lake. This is definitely a sign of a mana explosion. There is so much magic energy here that it's even hard to breathe. An explosion of such mana should have drained all of the mage's life force. In the middle of all this devastation, his son lay motionless. Wake up, Wood, Nikin ran towards the boy, praying that he was alive. Wood was vomiting blood and seemed to have internal injuries, but his body was still warm. And he was breathing. Immediately, the guards shouted that they had found Lady Nevia, and the Duke realized what had happened. Wood kidnapped Nevia to harm her, but caused a mana explosion. But now Wood's condition is more important. Nevia is nothing more than his property. Even if Wood had killed the girl, she could simply be replaced by another. And the Duke ordered a doctor to be called quickly. Meanwhile, he asked how Nevia was, and the guard who examined the girl reported that she had no external injuries or fractures. She had simply lost consciousness. After ordering her to be taken to the doctor, Nikin realized that she was apparently not injured, so everything was fine. Despite what happened, Duke Agnes will be able to organize a meeting, but the rumors about the pillar will spread throughout the capital very soon. Since this happened in Agnes territory, the Empress will use this as an excuse to humiliate him and, somehow, to resolve the situation, Nikin will need a scapegoat. Something glinted under the man's feet, and he realized it was Nevia's hairpin that she had been wearing the other day. There was blood on the hairpin, but Nevia didn't have enough wounds to leave bloodstains. At that moment, the guards reported that they had found a man who served in the Agnes household. The servant sat on the floor and was trembling with fear, begging to be saved. The Duke immediately recognized him with disgust as the servant of Wood, his son. He must have been able to successfully kidnap Nevia thanks to the servant's help. This was timely, and the Duke ordered him to be captured like a criminal, while the servant justified himself saying that he couldn't kidnap the lady on his own free will, and that it was all Lord Wood's fault. How dare you accuse my son of this? Nicken gave the servant a loud slap. Sure, some bold slave kidnapped and locked up Nevia, but Wood found her and saved his sister. That's how you can imagine it. Duke Agnes found his scapegoat and ordered him to be imprisoned. Most likely, Wood wasn't the only one who knew about his plan. There must be others who know the truth about what happened. Damn it, the Duke should deal with this personally, as well as the theft problem. But first of all, he needs to send a letter to the imperial family. When she leaves this place, she will definitely open a small coffee shop and make fruit jams for desserts. She will add frozen cherries and strawberries to the lemon juice to make it sweet and sell it separately in a glass bottle along with coffee. And buns. Yes, Charlotte always dreamed of a life like that. One day she will collect a lot of money, pay off her parents' debt, and immediately break the contract with the Duke. The girl dreamed in her room. In fact, no matter how much money she has saved, she won't be able to leave here in her entire life. Of course she planned to earn money in any way, even illegally, but they are already accusing her of embezzlement, even before she has done anything. Charlotte, what do we do? All the servants who worked with you will end up in Philippa's hands. A group of worried servants burst into her room. These were the workers who had originally conspired with her to overthrow Philippa. All of them, as one, trying to get their hands on the money the nanny stole. But now they find themselves in the same pitiful situation she was in. Lady Nevia controlled these idiots like puppets. Why should you worry? This is a great opportunity, said the girl, standing up calmly. She explained with a smile that the nanny had betrayed the chef, which is why the theft was discovered. These two had been involved in the theft, and not just once. One of the maids asked her how she knew that, and if she had any proof. Charlotte gritted her teeth. Lady Nevia had told her not to accuse Philippa of embezzlement, but now she couldn't do anything else. So she proposed to the others, since they didn't believe her, to go to the dungeon and tell the cook that Philippa had betrayed him. And then he would simply drag her down with him. According to the investigation, all the evidence related to the theft was provided by Philippa, but neither Charlotte nor the department employees knew about the ledger. Linden informed the Duke. Nicken wondered what Nevia's maid had to do with it, but the butler was still working on it. In any case, she was just a servant. The Duke couldn't dedicate all his energy to something so useless. First, send a letter to the imperial family, he ordered the butler. The ceremony had to be postponed due to the health of Agnes' successor. Looking up, the Duke discovered an unusual movement in his study. We want to inform you about Philippa's thefts, said the servants timidly. So, you mean that Philippa was originally working in collusion with the chef, and the jewelry found in Charlotte's room was offered by Philippa, concluded Nicken after listening to the delegation of servants. Based on their words, he ordered Linden to search Philippa and also interrogate the chef about it. Duke Agnes knew that many of the servants didn't get along with Philippa, but why did they decide to protect the maid Charlotte? He thought she was a good maid, but what had happened had given him some doubts about her. And now that he thought about the situation, he could clearly see that some things didn't actually add up. Nicken had seen many people who tried to be loyal to Agnes, but keeping workers whose purpose was unclear made no sense. So he decided to simply send this maid to the laundry and look for a new one for Nevia. Afterwards, the Duke went to his son's room and asked the doctor how Wood was. Fortunately, there are no serious problems, but I cannot say for sure about the magical state. It is better to consult a specialist in this field, replied the doctor while the boy lay with his eyes closed. After letting the doctor go, Nicken sat in a chair next to him to be with his son. It must be a side effect of the mana explosion, but he was able to keep his life. When a mage spends so much mana at once, he dies. Why did you do this, Wood? The Duke asked softly, wondering if he really hated Nevia so much as to commit such a dangerous act. Would it be the right decision to leave Nevia here after everything that happened? Or is it not true? A child can still die from an accident or illness. It's not difficult to organize something like that. Light silver hair, smooth white skin. And among these color combinations, her scarlet eyes stand out. If she were 10 years older, she would have become an irresistible beauty who would have won the hearts of thousands, or even millions of people. And according to the secret data that Nicken received, her appearance matches Prince Aerys' tastes. a bad card that one cannot easily get rid of. At that moment, the boy who was lying in bed woke up with a groan. And the man ran towards him and asked if everything was all right. You lost consciousness due to the mana explosion. I am very glad that it was only an accident, the Duke said, and asked his son why that swirl appeared. But the boy just looked at his father in bewilderment. He didn't understand what he was talking about, what kind of mana explosion, what kind of swirl he created. Wood didn't remember any of that. Early in the morning, he went into the forest. He saw the girl trying to escape, and that's it. A memory lapse. Hearing his son tell him that he didn't remember anything, Nicken worried. There were many blue sparks, and among them a red one. Memory helped Wood remember some fragments of what had happened. Remembering the red eyes, the boy felt his heart beating wildly and then falling into the abyss. He screamed as loudly as if he were reliving everything that had happened, thus scaring his father. It's all her fault. She made me like this. It's all that poor woman's fault, Wood screamed hysterically. The Duke calmed his son down by stroking his shoulders and promised him that he would fix everything, because his father did everything for him. After Nicken calmed down, he left his room, and on the way he met the butler and asked him what was wrong with Nevia. Upon hearing that she was still sleeping, the man wondered what he should do if Nevia married the crown Prince Ares. Then Agnes would rule the empire for at least 100 years. Prepare everything necessary for the shipment to the imperial palace, the Duke ordered the butler, who accepted the order and also said that Sir Spencer was requesting a meeting with him. And although Duke Agnes wanted to postpone the meeting until tomorrow, the butler informed him that the tutor's important question could not be postponed. Nicken was still forced to meet with Sir Spencer, but his entire appearance expressed dissatisfaction. He asked him what was wrong. The teacher coughed slightly, choosing his words to tell the Duke the important news. I discovered how to cure magic reflux disease, the man said. Nicken digested his words for a few seconds and then jumped from his seat, shouting if it was true. And it was the purest truth. Edward had already cured his younger sister this way, so the Duke, trembling with emotion, asked him to save his daughter Vivian as well. Soon, Sir Spencer was already in the girls' room, explaining along the way what would happen after they extracted all the princess magic energy, re-inject it to ensure stable mana circulation, and to avoid a mana explosion. He would combine his energy with hers. As soon as the mana returned to her body, with a blinding glow, Vivian felt different, and the master declared that they had succeeded. Nicken couldn't believe what he was seeing. His daughter's magic had returned to its normal state. How was that possible? Full of joy, he ran to hug his daughter. Dad, does that mean Vivi is already cured of her illness? The girl asked, and the man answered with certainty that Vivi's illness is already cured. Vivian was very happy, and the Duke thought that this girl would become empress. Thank you very much, you saved my daughter, Nicken told Sir Spencer after they left the girl's room. The master replied that he had done what he should, while twisting the ring on his finger. The man then asked the Duke what he would do now with Lady Nevia, which made him think. Now that Vivian's illness is cured, Nevia's engagement to Prince Ares makes no sense. If Nicken kills her, Wood will hate him to death, so there is no need to keep her alive. How about we turn Lady Nevia into the heir to the Duchy of Esselred? Asked Edward, following the previously outlined plan. The Duke asked him confusedly what he meant, and the master commented that Duke Agnes was the richest man in the empire. But despite that, he was worried about his flaws. Nicken himself thought that no one could compare to the magic of the Esselred family. Their skills were 100 years ahead of the imperial mages. With the help of their research, they had created a powerful army that surpassed the remaining 3 duchies. Among other families, this is the most dangerous place. But if we look at the current Esselred, no matter how powerful their army is, after the arrival of the current head of the family, the duchy is simply falling apart. I wonder if this Theoben Albin even acts as head of the house, Spencer asked, keeping the conversation going and leading the dialogue. Duke Agnes waved his hand enthusiastically. What could this fool do? It was difficult to imagine what would happen to the Esselred house. Then, Sir Spencer suggested looking at it from the other side if Lady Nevia, who would become the heir to the Duchy of Esselred, married the heir to the Duchy of Agnes. Then, the power of both families would be in their hands. Nicken thought it was a good idea. He would like to keep Wood away from Nevia until he gets better, but when he grows up, he will understand how useful Nevia is. However, he doubted that Esselred would accept this. There was still the imperial family. It would be a problem if they showed their greed and didn't allow them to carry out this plan. because after all, Nevia would become the heir to the Duchy of Esselred. "Duke, do you really think this will be a problem for Agnes?" asked Sir Spencer, insulting the Duke's dignity. He managed it. Nicken considered his words fair, because being emperor is no longer safe. Nevia is just a pawn he raised, so there's no way he can lose now. Duke Agnes laughed. He simply asked the master to cure his daughter and suggested such a wonderful idea. And then he himself suggested that Sir Spencer go to the capital and tell His Majesty about his successes. He was sure he wouldn't regret having given him the title. If so, Sir Spencer will become a vassal and partner of the Duchy of Agnes, Nicken asked, who didn't want to lose such a valuable asset. Spencer was surprised before. He would have accepted such an offer without even thinking about it. But now, he replied that this was too much generosity for him. However, the Duke assured him that this was just what talented people like him needed. "I will provide you with the best possible, so think about it," the Duke smiled. The master agreed to think about it, and added that before leaving he would visit Lady Nevia, if the master didn't mind. Nevia opened her eyes and looked thoughtfully at the ceiling, wondering if it had always been like that in her room. Then the girl wondered how long she had been sleeping, and her gaze fell on the clock that marked 9. She jumped if it was already 9 in the morning. So, how many days had already passed? What would happen if she lost her chance to escape while she was unconscious? Conscious, damn would, first she needs to resolve this situation. She called the maid, and an unknown girl entered the room. "Where is Charlotte?" Nevia asked, wondering what had happened. And with an inscrutable face, she listened to how Charlotte was sent to work in the laundry for not properly attending to the lady. "From now on, I am your personal servant," said the girl, and Nevia thought that this was too severe a punishment due to her kidnapping. Unless, of course, something else had happened. Then the girl asked where the nanny was now, and received the answer that she was in prison. And she realized that Charlotte had revealed Philippa's mistakes, which had made the Duke suspicious. He had made accusations too soon. Although Nevia had warned her. "How long did I sleep?" the girl asked, and heard that it was around a day, fortunately. These days would not affect her plans in any way. So today is the day Edward will fulfill the terms of the contract, and soon her life will change dramatically. However, it seems Wood didn't say anything. The maid's behavior was too calm. It's strange that Wood hasn't told her about his magic, because he's the type of person who can't sit still for even a day. Nevia asked the maid how her brother was, and she replied that the young master had caused a mana explosion when saving Lady Nevia. And she added that, fortunately, she was not injured. Either way, there was no benefit in her kidnapping, which was to be expected, and Nevia was not in the least surprised. At the same time, Sir Spencer entered the room eager to speak with the lady. The man looked at her openly, without a trace of contempt in his eyes. "Welcome, master, has your sister recovered?" asked the girl, sitting elegantly in a chair with a cup of tea. Edward thanked her for her concern. He was baffled as to how a person could remain unharmed while being at the epicenter of a mana explosion. Without much desire to converse, Nevia replied that she was fine and returned to her tea. But the master wanted to say something. "Are you okay?" the man asked, and Nevia's hand moved in surprise. And although she replied politely that she was completely fine, she was secretly puzzled as to why he was asking her that. It didn't seem like the usual Edward. She was also interested in knowing why he was there, since today was the day he was supposed to go with Duke Agnes to the Imperial Palace. Nevia smiled mysteriously, realizing that the game was about to begin. When the adults are away, the home becomes a place of chaos for the children, the radiant girl said. From the expression on her face, Edward realized that she was plotting something again. The 8-year-old girl created the current situation by controlling everyone like puppets. So even if something were to happen to someone, nothing would affect her plan. Her plans don't end there. Edward doesn't know what her goal is, but he is confident that she will carry it out to perfection. And even if the plan fails, she will create something even bigger. He won't be able to become her master, but he would like to take the place of a friend or counselor. Besides, Lord Wood said he didn't remember how he created the whirlpool. The master pointed out, and the girl suddenly realized. She could never have imagined such a result, but now it is clear why he remained silent. That will make the escape much easier. Interrupting their conversation, someone knocked on the door, reminding Sir Spencer that he had to leave. "Please forgive me and take care." Edward was not very happy about being in such a hurry. Hearing his last words, the girl was confused and surprised. She didn't understand why he was doing this. but Edward Spencer acts as if he were her friend. Every week after her return to the past, it would rain, reminding her of the arrival of winter. The freezing raindrops polluting the streets remind Nevia of her failures. It seems that this time the rain will start at the wrong time if it starts raining sooner. Nicken's return could take longer. Seeing Duke Agnes board the carriage, Nevia was glad that at least now it wasn't useless. The girl expressed her desire to take a walk around the area, which she told the maid. But already heading towards the exit, she lingered at the dressing table. There in the box was the hairpin she thought she had lost. She is still within the duchy's territory, so she must continue playing the role of a stupid and kind imposter. How could the lady recover so quickly? It's a true miracle. The words of Vivian's maidens echoed through the hall, praising her, and the Agnes duchy in every possible way. At one point, Vivian, who was walking around the house, exclaimed in surprise and stopped. She saw Sister Nevia right in front of her. "Vivian, is it really possible for you to walk for so long?" The girl asked solicitously, but Vivian looked at the girl standing in front of her from head to toe, noticing that her ragged dress looked like the one a servant would wear. Also, what is this hairpin with a single pearl, while all of Vivi's clothes are decorated with ruffles lace, jewelry, and silk ribbons? Remembering that, after all, her sister was a fake princess, the girl ran towards Nevia. "Sister, my illness is already cured," she said boastfully, trying to offend Nevia. But she only asked again if it was true, knowing everything perfectly well, and looked at her with her bright red eyes. Vivian shuddered as if she had crashed into a wall, not understanding what had just happened. But then Nevia, as always, asked kindly if she was really cured. Vivi, deciding that she had simply imagined it, confirmed it cheerfully, thinking that now that she was cured, Nevia was nothing. Lady Nevia is a fake princess who has replaced Lady Vivian. How dare a fake mix with the high aristocracy? That was what the nanny told Vivian. Everyone likes her sister, and it seems her brother likes her too, since he almost died saving her. He told Vivi to die, his own brother, but her sister Nevia is just an imposter. The girl was angry. Since Vivi has recovered, her sister will no longer need to replace her, the girl told Vivian frankly. Nevia remained silent, but then the servant's voice was heard agreeing with her mistress. "Of course, it is natural that Lady Vivian be restored her true rights as a princess," said Mackie laughing, and even asked Nevia about it again. The girl understood what they were talking about and agreed that Vivian, of course, should exercise her rights as a true princess because she was only replacing her. Mackie felt uncomfortable for having admitted it so obediently. "But I will still take care of the nanny," added Nevia, surprising Vivian with her words. Mackie realized that the girl was referring to Philippa's embezzlement, but was confused about what she was going to do. And Nevia was already explaining to her sister that she had heard the nanny was in jail. "We cannot let the nanny who took care of us for so many years die," said the girl so sincerely that she could have been taken for an angel. Vivian was frightened by her words. "What nonsense! Why should the nanny die? Little sister, only a true princess could handle this." The girl held her head up proudly. Mackie was frightened by the lady's behavior and tried to reason with her, because it depended on the master's decision, and she could not act voluntarily. But she wavered when she heard Nevia's following words. "That's right, then it's better for me to tell my father about this, and for you to listen to Mackie," smiled the girl. But Vivian was already nervous. It was enough for her to have lost her brother. She would not give up her father. Nevia hesitated and asked if it wouldn't be better for her as the older sister to do all this. "No, Vivi will do that," said the true Princess Agnes whimsically. The older sister hesitated, pointing out that it would be too difficult for Vivian, but the girl became increasingly irritated knowing she wanted to save the nanny. Well, Vivian decided she would do it herself to prove how useless her sister was. Just looking at her, she still looks worried and pathetic. Vivian only has to say something, and the nanny will be released. It's not that hard. A true princess can do this, the girl shouted and jumped on the spot. She turned sharply and headed towards the dungeon, intending to carry out her plan. As she walked, she gave Maki an order not to let her sister do anything, and ran off, leaving the maid standing there bewildered. Maki didn't know what to do, and besides, Nevia, standing beside her, asked if it was okay that her mistress left without her. If she starts punishing everyone who goes against her, it will cause a lot of problems. The girl pointed out. The maid was angry, but she knew she was right. She called the others, ordering them to follow Mistress Vivian, and they obeyed. Nevia remained standing in the hallway, watching as several maids struggled to keep up with the small and agitated girl. Nevia continued on her way and opened the door carefully, looking inside the room. There were many maids working in the laundry, but she never saw the one she came to see. She stopped one of the girls and asked her where to look for Charlotte. Charlotte, Nevia called out softly to the maid, who was very busy. The maid turned around in surprise. She didn't expect to see her mistress there. After a while, Charlotte told her mistress everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. And although she didn't listen to her when Nevia told her not to blame Philippa, Charlotte was still glad to be alive. The girl listened in silence as the maid headed to the laundry, without even having a chance to apologize for that carelessness. Well, she wanted to do it now. But Charlotte's next words left Nevia really surprised. "I beg your pardon, my lady," Charlotte said and bowed. Nevia was surprised. She never thought she would hear an apology like that. She had no particular desire to help anyone from Agnes, but it seemed like everything had changed. "My lady, I think it's time for you to go. If you stay here, could you say some nonsense?" The girl said, embarrassed, not paying attention to her expression. And Nevia clearly understood that before there had never been a person she wanted to help. Until today. The girl turned sharply and kicked the bucket in such a way that the water spilled on the floor. "You know all this is bullshit," Nevia said. "I will end your lifelong contract with the duchy." Charlotte shuddered upon hearing these words from her mistress. She asked how the mistress could do that, and the girl replied that she would exchange Ashy's dresses for money. The money will remain even after paying the fine, and Charlotte will be free to do with it whatever she wants. As Charlotte listened to what the mistress was saying, she felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Don't be so happy. I'm only doing all this because I have a task for you," Nevia commented. The maid was deeply moved, wiped her tears obediently, and calmed down. "How can I serve you, my lady?" She was willing to do whatever the girl asked of her. Wood clearly remembered grabbing her by the neck, but what happened next seemed to have been erased from his memory. Also, he almost died from the explosion back then. But what about her? While the boy was furious because he didn't understand anything, someone knocked on the door. A maid entered the room and said that a maid, named Charlotte, wanted to meet him. She explained that Charlotte was Lady Nevia's personal maid. And although the young master was puzzled that a woman of low birth would dare to ask for permission to meet with him, he still allowed her to enter. "Thank you for allowing me to meet you, young master," the girl bowed. Wood sat on the sofa as if he were the owner of the house and asked her what she needed. The girl seemed to hesitate, but still began to say that it was about Lady Nevia. "In fact, she is a commoner," the girl said naively, and Wood shuddered as if he had been struck. The ex-maid explained that the Duke kept this fact a secret, and that if he realized that someone from the outside had found out, everything would end badly. However, the boy gritted his teeth, because the girl he hated so much was not just a low-born aristocrat, but a commoner. Charlotte continued saying that she found out that she would soon become the adopted daughter of Ethelred, and that she would also become his equal in status, and that the knight also wanted to marry the young knight to her. "I will marry a commoner, that's what my father said." The boy was trembling from nervous shock, but the maid only confirmed this calmly, suggesting they ask the Duke when he would return. However, by that time, the official decision to send Lady Nevia as successor will already have been made. Wood was in deep shock, as if the marriage were something normal. He had heard about sham marriages so many times that he was starting to get angry. But the boy couldn't comprehend how his father could do this to him, while the maid watched his reaction attentively. "Sir, there is a great path for you," the girl said, smiling. Young Master Wood, please help me. I was cheated, forgive me." Their conversation was interrupted by the ex-nanny Philippa, who burst into the room without knocking. The woman literally froze in the doorway upon seeing the scene unfolding before her. She wondered why the maid Charlotte was in the young master's room. "How could you enter the room without the young master's permission, Philip?" the girl asked haughtily. She added that this was a lack of respect, which caused the woman to take a step back. And then she lunged at her, attacking the girl and shouting that it was all her fault, and that she was the one to blame for everything. But a few moments later, a powerful jet of water hit Philip in the back. "Get out of the room. If you commit a crime, you should stay quietly in jail." "But what are you doing now?" Wood asked the ex-nanny sternly. The stunned woman lay on the floor. She was horrified by what she saw in front of her. The young knight looked only at that girl with those eyes. The woman nervously said that she had raised him and asked him not to do that to her. But the boy only asked how she got out of prison, while his father went to the imperial palace. He supposed that the idiot Vivian might have done something, And at that moment, a crowd of knights burst into his room. Then Wood ordered them to take the nanny back to jail, and that, no matter what Vivian said, they shouldn't let her out. Young master, the woman howled upon realizing that she no longer had any chance. After dismissing the uninvited guests, Wood turned to the maid and asked her where they had left off, intending to listen to her proposal. Do you want to sell all this? The most beautiful dresses shown before you. Then the butler Linden asked her what she would do after that. The girl clasped her hands hesitantly and replied that she wanted to buy a gift for her family. Today is the day Vivian was cured, so Nevia wants to give her and the other family members a gift. Linden had no objections and promised to look into it. A while later, there was a knock on the door. It was Charlotte, who said she had done what the lady had told her. Nevia handed her a medium-sized bag and told her to take it. The maid looked inside and found a bunch of gold coins in there, and the girl told her to go to the accountant, pay the fine and rescind the contract, and then leave there that same day. It would be safer if she opened a cafe and ran a business, added Nevia. The former maid of Lady Nevia couldn't believe her luck. She sincerely thanked Lady Nevia for her help. Outside the window, rain was falling nonstop. The girl found that the sleeves of the dress were a bit short after all. It was the same clothes she had worn last year. She turned around and looked around. The beautiful room she had achieved in her 9th life, but had never been able to use for long. The room every girl dreams of, except for her. A creepy and disgusting place. She will finally leave the house she hates so much. Even if she loses, the only price will be death. Nevia was slowly walking down the stairs when she heard a noise below. You said, now you have started to ignore Vivi's words. Release the nanny right now, I told you. You shouldn't listen to your brother, but to me. The hysterical voice of a child was heard. Since the young master is the successor to the duchy, we must follow his orders, so please return to your room. The butler admonished the girl. How dare you? Don't you know that in the future, Lady Vivian will become empress? Shouted Philippa, pointing her finger at the butler. Naturally, after her recovery, she will marry the prince. And what will be the punishment for not following the orders of a member of the imperial family? Shouted the woman, not noticing how the expression on Linden's face and the guards standing behind him changed. Meanwhile, Nevia, walking down the stairs, asked the nanny if it was true that Vivian would become empress. The youngest daughter of the duke, Agnes, looked at her sister with disgust, thinking she had disobeyed Vivi, and had come here to interfere. The nanny stated with confidence that it would be so. The lady would become empress. If she hadn't been sick, she would have become engaged to the crown prince long ago, and was surprised that Lady Nevia couldn't know that. As all this happened in front of witnesses, the other servants started whispering. Nevia really didn't know anything about this, as the whole mansion was talking about it. If Vivian becomes the next empress, I will only be happy for her, Nevia replied. However, she asked Philippa if there had been an official announcement, which made the woman shudder, realizing the horror of her mistake. It seems I'm not such a fool after all, right? The girl laughed. It is very dangerous to talk about the imperial family because many things can happen in the future. The butler also understood that it was easy to accuse a person of treason if we were talking about the next empress, who had not yet been announced. Vivian didn't fully understand the gravity of the situation, but she was angry that Nevia was there. The little sister is jealous that Vivi will become empress, the girl shouted whimsically. Philippa continued to echo her feelings, and then Vivian caught the butler's gaze. Shut your mouth, Philippa. The always calm guardian of the house barked so loudly that the young woman shuddered in fear. Linden pointed his finger at the woman, calling her a sinner who wouldn't even admit her guilt after betraying Agnes, and asked her if she thought they couldn't arrest her for it. Obeying the butler's silent command, the guards grabbed the woman, with the intention of returning her to prison. Nevia calmly watched as Philippa's attempts to justify herself in some way and blame her for everything were useless. For a second, the woman was paralyzed upon noticing the expression on the girl's overly calm face. The nanny is absolutely right, Nevia said with just her lips, looking directly into the woman's eyes. And then she smiled charmingly, realizing that one problem had ended. This scoundrel must be torn to pieces. The ex-nanny screamed like a madwoman as they took her away. Linden, where is Dad? Where is my dad? Is Bibi scared? Is Time afraid of her sister? The Duke's youngest daughter burst into tears like a child. Her maids ran towards their mistress, competing with each other to offer her something tasty to eat, while she waited for her master to return. Let's go there. One of the maids, trying to get the girl out of the hallway, deliberately pushed Nevia. It was Maki, who also looked at the girl askance and attentively. It did not escape her that Lady Nevia was going somewhere, which she said out loud. "Where are you going?" Lyndon asked Nevia, and she replied innocently that she was going to look for gifts. The man thought, it was raining hard outside and the lady was going shopping. But if this was what Lady Vivian wanted, they always let her go, so the butler offered to prepare a carriage for her. "My lady, the carriage crew is already waiting," Nevia's new maid suddenly said. The girl timidly said it was time to leave, while Nevia realized that the man, who didn't even know she was leaving, had prepared a carriage for her. Her enemy was helping her, how funny. The girl realized, but she still headed for the exit. In any case, it's too obvious. The carriage was waiting in a secluded place. It didn't have the Agnes coat of arms. And the girl saw the coachman for the first time. And besides, a short figure was sitting next to the coachman, trying to hide their face under a deep hood. Without thinking twice, the girl quickly approached the carriage and extended her hand. The hooded man shook his hand, as if he had been burned by fire, and pulled back. "Oh my God, I ask for your forgiveness." My companion felt embarrassed by the lady's beauty. The coachman commented kindly. Nevia smiled back and said everything was fine, because she got what she wanted, and there was a black crescent moon shining on her hand. The maid hurried her mistress to get into the carriage quickly, so she wouldn't catch a cold due to the heavy rain. The hooded figure cast a dark look at the girl. How dare the dirty commoner touch him? The carriage started moving, and, looking out the window, Nevia realized that they were moving in the opposite direction to the capital. Surrounded by lakes and forests, it is an ideal place to commit illegal activities, and also an ideal place to commit murders. But the girl showed no concern. Everything was going according to her plan, because that road also leads to the Eselrid Duchy. Previously, the maid suggested to Wood that Lady Nevia become a slave. And although the boy objected that slavery was prohibited by imperial laws, she assured him that there were several ways to legalize it. Soon, Lady Nevia will go beyond the borders of Agnes. Charlotte suggested finding an assassin to pursue her, and when Nevia is near the Eselrid Duchy, order an attack on her. "That's right, we can't even talk about adopting her after that," realized Wood. "Nevia will automatically become a slave. The Empire's laws for commoners are very strict. Yes, if her identity as a commoner is revealed, she will become a slave even without a trial. Of course, if the attacked person does not consider it an attack, all their efforts will be useless, since Wood is poorly informed about imperial laws. He can't know this. Hire an assassin to attack the Eselrid Duchy. Although Wood is young, he will do it with confidence. On a rainy day like today, water magic will be stronger than ever. After having stolen Wood's magic, Nevia takes advantage of the weather for her benefit. Looking at her hand, the girl mechanically noticed that it was quite battered, and wondered if Duke Eselrid would listen to her. She had heard that they do not kill the guilty until they negotiate, as they consider it a disgusting act. "He will not kill," the girl said, laughing confidently. Almost voiceless, she didn't want to become the favorite daughter. Instead, Nevia would show the Duke that she could be useful to him and thus ensure her safety. The carriage stopped, footsteps of someone were heard outside, and Nevia realized that the mercenaries were already there. "Money first," a male voice was heard. Wood replied that he would give more when they completed everything successfully, so they should try hard to get that money. While they were talking outside, Nevia kept counting in her head 3, 2, 1. As soon as the mercenary opened the carriage door, a deafening explosion was heard. Someone screamed hysterically. Nevia ran towards the forest, and Wood noticed it. "She is running away. Catch her," the boy shouted, but the girl didn't even turn around. Behind Nevia, explosions sounded one after another. She immediately recognized the magical attacks, which meant there was a mage among them. Even if she died, she had to die in the Eselrid Duchy. So, gritting her teeth, the girl sped up her pace so she could inflict at least some damage to Agnes. At that moment, there was an explosion of such force that Nevia was thrown by the shockwave. She fell, feeling her body refusing to obey her. But the border of the duchy was literally a couple of steps away, so gathering the rest of her strength, she crawled forward. She couldn't die so easily. This thought gave her strength. A soft crunch was heard, and the girl opened her eyes in surprise. "They say a worm moves even if stepped on because you always give me trouble. You're not even worthy of being a slave." Wood was in front of her, and he was very angry. Wood was about to kill her immediately, but someone else stopped him. It was one of the mercenaries who brusquely grabbed the young knight by the collar of his clothes and asked him why he didn't say the girl was a sorceress. The man lifted the boy into the air and asked him if he knew where they were now. And now they were in the territory of the Esselrid Duchy mansion. If we get rid of someone like you, nobody will know, the mercenary smiled. Wood remembered that he was the successor to the Agnes Duchy, and killing him would bring many problems. Besides, he needed money, so he could give much more, but only if the job was done. The words about money calmed the mercenary, who left the boy and went to do his job. You can't be so cruel to children, but I can't let you die so easily, he said, grabbing the girl by the neck and lifting her off the ground. Nevia saw that the entrance to the Esselrid Duchy was right in front of her. The only thing that interfered was the mercenary, who opened his palm, creating a fireball, and the girl realized it was a magical attack. She quickly touched the hand that was holding her. The man was paralyzed with surprise, not understanding, but feeling that something was happening. Nevia smiled, and her smile turned out to be quite terrifying. And then there was an explosion, many times stronger than the previous ones. It was so strong that the girl was literally thrown very high. She could die simply from the fall, but either way, she was able to damage Agnes in some way. So this death is the most useful of all. Nevia fell for what seemed like an eternity, and waited the same amount of time for the end of her life. However, when she landed softly enough, she heard an unknown male voice telling her that he had seen much in his long life. The girl opened her eyes in surprise, smelling the scent of rain, blood, and earth. That mixed with a fresh and sweet smell. The unknown man held Nevia in his arms and stared at her. The red eyes were similar to hers, but she had never seen that face before in her entire life. It seemed strange that she was seeing him for the first time, but on the other hand, it was the first time they met in person, so it was natural. "Why are you scared?" the man asked, but the girl no longer heard anything. She closed her eyes, such a familiar sensation, the feeling of death approaching. But it's okay, it's not the first time. It doesn't matter that she is dying. The main thing is that she was able to cause at least some damage to Agnes. Right, everything is okay. And as if it hadn't been her, who grabbed his clothes and said in a weak voice, "Please help." When Nevia opened her eyes, she found herself in a dark and sinister place. She died or returned to the past again, but the reincarnations had to end. The girl shook her hand and felt a dull pain, and the next moment her eyes opened, realizing she was alive. This was a great shock to Nevia. She sat up in bed and found herself lying on black sheets, surrounded by walls, black furniture and floors. There was only one place with such an interior, the Esselrid Duchy. Nevia wondered if the man with the scarlet eyes was Lark Esselrid, and she felt discouraged by the fact that for the first time in her life, she received help when she asked for it. That pajama she is wearing looks very expensive, like Vivian's. They even healed all her wounds and washed her. And she doesn't seem to feel any pain, because they gave her anesthesia. Now that I think about it, Count Theo van Alven, cousin of Duke Esselrid, owned an anesthetic plantation. However, it is very difficult to obtain permission from the Empire to use it, because the anesthetic is usually used as a narcotic, and its price is high, which makes it a very valuable tool. Kindness always has a price, the girl muttered softly, bewildered. It would be good if they saw some use in her. She should take the opportunity and talk to the Duke. In fact, moving here is enough for her. Even if she left Agnes, she is still their person, so she must act faster than Nicken. And for this, Nevia must negotiate with Duke Esselrid. As long as he keeps her safe, she will be useful to him. The girl grimaced at the unpleasant feeling of thirst, and it wouldn't hurt to eat. Looking around, she saw cups and some snacks on the table, and there was also medicine lying there. They must have been left there especially for her. Perhaps in the current situation it is normal. But now was not the time for that. She needed to quickly find Duke Esselrid and talk to him, so the girl took the offered medicine and drank it. The door slammed open, and a disgruntled voice announced that someone was allowing an unknown girl to be taken care of in the duchy's guest room. Damn it, I'm already busy, and I still have to worry about this. A man was quickly approaching Nevia. It was Count Theo van Alven, the current representative of Esselrid, who was indignant at someone who did not personally take care of the house, and who didn't care about anything. Nevia knew the Count. He was a greedy man who only needed money and power, a man who had no etiquette or manners. "Greetings, my name is Nevia." The girl introduced herself, and the man finally paid attention to her. After examining the young woman's elegant bow, Thea Van immediately recognized her as Nicken's adopted daughter. According to rumors, she was of unprecedented beauty, and they seemed to be true in the last 5 years. He had not seen anyone more beautiful than her. Theovan smiled. It seemed the heavens were helping him. His daughter's rival for the title of Empress, after having an accident, ended up here. You are a duke's adopted daughter. When you go in pajamas, your true level is clear as day. You are ashamed of your low aristocracy origin, he asked brazenly. Nevia expected something like that from him, but the following words surprised the girl. Lark is a very cruel person. How dare he give such a luxurious room to someone who attacked the duchy, you crazy bastard. The count turned around, and the girl realized that he was openly humiliating the duke, and did not respect him at all. Although the duke did not look like the man described, he had an aura around him that would make anyone tremble. And the girl wondered if the duke was intentionally allowing Theovan to do whatever he wanted, while he continued to be enraged by the waste of expensive medicines and excessive hospitality. In any case, the letter will arrive tomorrow, the man laughed. Upon hearing about the letter, Nevia became cautious, and then they grabbed her arm brusquely and intended to lock her in the dungeon, at least until the next day. Let me go. Duke Esselrid brought me here. The girl shouted, resisting, but the count only squeezed her hand harder, assuring her that Lark did not care about others. Whether she died or not, he wouldn't even blink. Yes, you must bow your head right now and beg for mercy. They pulled Nevia very brusquely and forcefully, and dragged her. Suddenly the girl felt a gust of wind, which brought with it a cold smell, and sweet that seemed very familiar to her. There is too much noise, a man's voice said, and someone grabbed the count's hand. Theovan was indignant. What kind of bastard dared to touch him? But he stopped immediately, because in front of him was none other than Lark Esselrid himself. Theovan noted in a breathless voice that Lark had woken up earlier than usual, and Lark confirmed it slowly, noticing that someone had disturbed his sleep. The count was angry. This bastard doesn't leave the house and dares to belittle him just because he knows a couple of spells. Although without him, he couldn't get them so cheap. You arrived just in time, Lark. Do you know what interesting news I heard today? Theovan asked, causing a flash of interest to appear on the duke's face, and the count was happy to be so stupid. Then Theovan reported that this girl was a criminal who dared to attack the duchy, and was indignant because Lark gave her a room intended for guests. Nevia listened in silence, as the count worried that if anyone found out about this, they would laugh at him. Whether in Agnes or anywhere else, no matter where you run, there will be bastards like that everywhere. But at that moment, Count Theovan Alvin was her enemy, so the girl. With feigned naivety, she asked if that was the count's problem. What nonsense! Theovan turned angrily, offended by such words. But the girl still innocently noted that the head of the house was Duke Esselrid, and Count Alvin was only his representative. And if this information leaks outside the duchy, then the one who violated the rules of aristocracy will only be the head of the family. And the count, as representative, will not be affected in any way after all. The highest aristocrats are very sensitive to such things, Nevia asked. The count shuddered nervously like a man aware of all the gossip in the social world. He couldn't fail to know the rumors that spoke of his insolent behavior by posing as the head of the duchy. This insolent girl, I don't want to see you. I will kill you immediately and send you back to Agnes, Theovan shouted furiously. But he stopped dead when he heard Lark's voice. I said you were too loud, or you wanted to test the limits of my patience. The voice of the Duke, Esselrid, sounded calm, but no less threatening. Having calmed down a little, the count noticed that the girl's words were true, but his younger brother should have taken care of this. But he hadn't gone too far by hinting at Lark's guilt in the current situation. In that case, brother, I advise you to leave this place immediately, the Duke said, leaning towards Theovan. His appearance and his words, which sounded threatening, frightened the count, and although he was very angry, he still said it was time to leave. Nevia watched as the count hurriedly left the room. It was nice to be with people who openly showed their hostility. It's difficult to deal with people who don't have a clear idea of what they are thinking. Left alone with Duke Esselrid, the girl thanked him for his help. My name is Nevia. I am the adopted daughter of Duke Nickon Agnes. She introduced herself and made an elegant bow. In response to her greeting, the man said he had never heard that name before, and a memory crossed Nevia's mind. He said something similar there in the forest when he saved her. A face she saw for the first time, a name she heard for the first time, as if he were puzzled by the very fact of her existence. He speaks as if he definitely knew all the people, everyone except her. Anyway, she couldn't lose this precious opportunity to talk to him, and she apologized for ruining the Duke's mood because of her. But if it weren't for the Duke, she would have died at the hands of her brother. The girl continued by saying that it seemed brother would had also sent mercenaries here. But the man interrupted her abruptly. Enough, stop pretending to be God knows what. And genuine surprise appeared on Nivea's face. She was perplexed. She was a child. Naturally, she should look scared and cry until she turns blue. In that case, I will do as you say, she let out a laugh. And then, without any pretense, to the Duke's confusion, she began to casually tell him that Wood had hired assassins to pretend they were attacking the Esselrid duchy. He wanted to turn me into a slave, but his plan failed. Since an open attack is prohibited by imperial laws, Duke Agnes would have turned me into a scapegoat to cover up his son. And he would have offered the duchy a lot of money to keep them quiet, Nivea continued. Since Duke Agnes is the richest man in the empire, he would offer a decent amount, and he would hand her over as a slave, so the Duke could do whatever he wanted with her. The compensation would be too great to maintain the knights who sooner or later would return from the battle. Nivea knew that Esselrid needed money to maintain the house, but the duchy was having problems with that, so she could only offer the Duke one thing. Please use me, the girl offered sincerely, as if she were shining like an angel. Lark Esselrid was speechless at her words. He was going to say something to her, but now he thinks it would be ridiculous. Lark brought her into the house because of her hair, and similar hair once saved his life. After seeing her handle herself in front of Theovan, everything became clear to him. She was very intelligent, and she had great knowledge of politics, but he had no intention of bringing such a big headache into this house, so he asked why she would do that. Because I can make good profits, Nivea replied immediately. Lark seemed surprised again, but he clasped his hands, nervously drumming his fingers. Waiting for her to say more, Nivea heard that the Esselrid magic was enormous, but the Duke was still single. And he had no children, and most likely in the future it would be the same, which would be a big problem, in which case she could use it. Do you want me to make you my adopted daughter? The man clarified, and the girl confirmed that if the Esselrid duchy had a successor, they could be used as a marriage trade asset. The Agnes duchy and the imperial family would never miss such an opportunity. If we compare the money that Agnes will offer now with what Nivea will bring in the future, then their payment will seem insignificant. So, I need to name you my successor for money in the distant future, he asked skeptically. Turning his back to the girl, he was not willing to accept her ridiculous proposal. And the Duke's appearance said it all. However, the girl said something that made him look at her again. I will take care of Count Theovan Alvin. It was not the promise of a child, but of a man confident in his words.